Right. So there is that aspect of it, and this is something you've been fighting for in your life.
I hope that everybody in our country understands that there's massive poverty all over the world, and it is a wealthy nation along with Europe and other wealthy nations. I believe we do have a moral obligation to lift up the poorest people in this world. But you know what? You can do it without destroying the middle class of this country. So I count me in as somebody who will work day and night with other major countries to help poor people. But you do not have to drive wages down or throw American workers out on the street. And that is a big difference between Secretary Clinton and myself in terms of our record.
Well, it's interesting. If she's the nominee against Donald Trump, he is closer to you on trade than she is.
Well, let me tell you something.
And is that an issue? Do you think that that's a...
Let me tell you something that I think objective political scientists would agree with. It's not just that in the last NBC poll, we were 18 points ahead of Trump. And I think Clinton was, 13?
11 to 13.
11 to 13. And that is true of most of the polls.
So you both win.
Let me finish. We almost always, not always, almost always do better against Trump than she does, sometimes by big numbers. What I think objective political scientists would tell you is that in a general election, we will, of course, get the vast majority of the Democratic votes, but we will do better with independent voters. We will, in fact, get those voters here in the Midwest who are concerned about trade. Why would you vote for Hillary Clinton if she supported virtually all of these trade agreements?
Let me ask you, what do you tell a Trump? If you could go to speak to a Trump rally, forget that we talk about the other parts of it, but they are concerned about the same issues, but they're going to him and not you. How do you convince them to come to you?
Hold on. I mean, we are getting millions of people coming to us.
I totally understand, but
this is what I would say. And by the way, you've heard me say this before, that I think the media has not done a good job in discussing why the middle class of this country is disappearing and why we have more income and wealth inequality than almost any major country on earth. So if you're a Trump supporter, let's say you're a 50-year-old guy, and your job went to China, you know what? You're really angry because now you have a job that maybe pays you 50 or 60% of what you used to have. You can't afford to send your kid to college. You are angry. And meanwhile, you're seeing almost all new wealth and income going to the top 1%. That issue you guys should talk about a little bit more as well. All right? Fair enough. All right. You're angry. And then Trump comes along and says, you know what? You're angry. You should be angry. It's the fault of the Muslims. It's the fault of the Mexicans. Well, problem is that is racism, that is xenophobia, and it has nothing to do with the real causes of the problem. So what I say to the Trump supporters, I say, look, do you understand that Donald Trump thinks that the $7.25 an hour minimum wage is as high as should go? And they'll say, really? That's a starvation wage. I say, did you hear Trump on a national Republican debate where he said wages in America are too high? Really? Too high? That Trump believes that climate change is a hoax emanating from China? Really? No kidding. That's pretty crazy. That Trump wants to give hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks to billionaire families like himself? I didn't know that. In other words, it is not just that I think we will defeat Trump because the American people do not think we should be divided up. This guy has insulted Mexicans, Muslims, women. He's insulted veterans. John McCain, a war hero. The American people are not going to vote for somebody like that.
Let's go to some questions here. I believe Kevin Pengrace has the first question for you, sir.
Hi,
Kevin, go ahead.
Throughout your career in Congress, you ran as an independent while caucusing with the Democrats. I'm curious about what went into your decision to run for president as a Democrat. Wouldn't it be more revolutionary to work outside the traditional political party structure and run as a...
See, the problem is Chuck would not have me on his program if I did that.
That is not true.
Oh, sure.
Totally true.
Look, here's the truth. You're right. I am the longest serving independent in the history of the United States Congress. And when we gave some thought to running for president, and the reason I gave thought, honestly, is not because I disrespect Secretary Clinton. I've known her for 25 years, and I respect her. But I just happen to believe that in this moment of history, given the crises that we face, it is too late for establishment politics and establishing economics. So we did have to make that decision. Do you run as an independent? Do you run within the Democratic Party? We concluded, and I think it was absolutely the right decision, that A, in terms of media coverage, you had to run within the Democratic Party. Number two, that to run as an independent, you could be a billionaire. If you're a billionaire, you can do that. I'm not a billionaire. So the structure of American politics today is such that I thought the right effort was to run within the Democratic Party. As you've indicated, I've been a member of the Democratic caucus for 25 years, in the House 16 and the Senate 9 years. We've worked very closely with Democrats. Obviously, I've been one of the strongest opponents of right-wing republicanism, so I felt comfortable doing it, and I think it was the right decision.
You know, you talked about your campaign as a revolution. Thank you very much, Kevin. Yeah. You talked about your campaign as a revolution. The turnout excitement is happening on the Republican side. Hasn't happened on the Democrat. We haven't seen the high turnout numbers that you have wanted.
No, that is absolutely incorrect. The numbers are very clear. We had, look, when you talk about that, you're comparing us to 2008 and Barack Obama.
Yeah.
All right, Barack Obama ran a campaign that was unbelievable. It was one of the great campaigns in American history. All right, but you know what? Despite that,
A revolution?
well, in terms of the nature of his campaign, the turnout was off the wall. In Iowa, they ran out of ballots. You remember that? All right, so let's talk about it. In Kansas, actually, the numbers in the Kansas caucus were higher this year than they were in 2008. In Maine, they were higher. In Michigan, it was the highest turnout since 1972. Colorado, I think it didn't break the record. It came pretty close. So, in fact, if you only want to compare us to 2008, which was the exception, okay. But in fact, the turnouts have been extraordinary in this campaign, and I'm proud of it.
All right, I believe the next question comes from Christian Gray.
I think Chuck Todd might vote Bernie. My question is, superdelegates make it possible for a Democratic candidate to win the nomination without winning a majority of votes. In this election particularly, it has also been a large contributor to ideas about Secretary Clinton's inevitability. I feel like superdelegates do the opposite of empowering Democratic voters like myself. So my question is, what can Democrats like me do to fix this process?
This is what you can do. And thank you. That's an excellent question. I fully concede to what everybody understands. Secretary Clinton is the candidate of the establishment. All right, so she has all of the governors, just almost all of the mayors, and all the congressmen, all of the senators. It is true, and many of them are superdelegates. But here's what is really weird: we won New Hampshire by over 20 points. We had to take on the governor, and we had to take on a United States senator. And yet it is likely that superdelegates in that state will actually vote or intending to vote for Secretary Clinton, despite the fact that the people in that state have spoken very strongly for me. And we're seeing that around the country. So to answer your question, I think what people should be saying to superdelegates, look, if Bernie Sanders wins a state with a big vote, why don't you vote with the people of your state? Because your point is a good point. What does democracy mean? Now, I know legally they have the right to do that. I'm not arguing that. But one of the goals of my campaign, when you talk about a political revolution, is to bring new people into the political process, young people, working class people who have in a significant way given up. And it is hard to do that if they come out and vote, we win the state, and you got superdelegates voting for Secretary Clinton, despite the fact she may have lost the state by a big vote. This is an issue we have got to focus on.
If you're the Democratic nominee, you're going to have a lot of power at the convention to sort of change some of the process. Will you scrap superdelegates?
I think we will rise significantly. Scrap is, I think
maybe not get rid of all of them.
That's right. I mean, I think governors and senators have an important role.
Significantly reduce.
Yeah. Look, what I am trying to do in this campaign is to revitalize American democracy, to get Americans involved in the political process so we do not have one of the lowest voter turnouts in the world. Rather, as I would like to see, one of the highest voter turnouts. You're not going to do that. It's a funny thing. We have rallies, thousands of people come out. I would say 95% of them have never been to a Democratic Party meeting in their lives. I want to bring people, young people, working class people in, because in my view, what you got right now is a Congress that is vigorously representing the interest of the billionaire class, not ordinary Americans. And the way we change that is to bring millions of people in to say to Congress, you know what? Represent us, not just campaign contributors.
All right. Well, we have to pay a few bills, so we're going to sneak in a break.
You're going to go to your wealthy
I don't know who they are, but we're going to go to the break and sneak in a break here. And when we come back, we're going to talk.
I'm going to go. Maybe it'll be like nonprofit. Maybe it'll be a pharmaceutical or a probably an oil company.
Okay, Anna, what's your opinion?
Look, so far it seems as though he's getting some difficult questions. The questions aren't so difficult. It's the framing of the questions that really bothers me. So it seems as though he's being antagonized for the people who shut down Trump's rally, right? And look, they protested Trump. That's political activism, right? That's one thing that our country is supposed to be in favor of. Of course, there's a lot of lip service when it comes to political activism, but the establishment doesn't really want that. And Bernie has to say, oh, we didn't, we put zero effort into that. We had nothing to do with it. He has to play, defense in order to do what he's doing right now. And it bothers me. Like, it's not something that he should be ashamed of. The people who shut down that rally, I look, it escalated, and I don't like that some people did get hurt, but think about the fact that there was a CBS reporter doing his job who got arrested simply for being there and doing his job, right? Like, we keep focusing on the wrong people. We should be focusing on the violent rhetoric of the person who's emboldened all these crazy racists to come out and sucker punch a black person who happened to protest a Trump rally. That's what we should be talking about.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. All the cops I know in Chicago, this is not like scientific, but all the cops I personally know are Trump supporters. Mm-hmm. So that's real.
That's a good sign.
And can I just say real quick, Chuck Todd, again, you hit it on the head. He's framing it completely wrong. He's doing a disservice to everybody. Instead of debunking what Donald Trump says, instead of saying, no, this guy's a pathological liar, and of course when he's saying it's crazy because he's been calling for violence and blah, 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 and then finally it shows up and he points the finger at you. What do you say to that? That's how you ask that question, not like, hey, some crazy guy who's been inciting violence for months and months and yelling racist shit at the top of his lungs. He's got a question for you. Answer him. So what you've now done is elevated. You've given credibility to what Trump's question is, and now you've said, hey, this is a real question. I'm going to bring it up on a national show. Now you have to answer it, which is wrong. That's not journalism. That you're doing that neutrality thing. I don't know if Trump's a maniac. Maybe you could tell everybody. Do you know, Bernie?
So the one thing that stood out to me, I just want to say this comment, and then you guys should jump in and tell me what you think, is where, Bernie Sanders called Trump a pathological liar, and Chuck Todd's response was, what does that mean?
What does that mean?
You don't know what that means? Well, if you don't know what that means and you haven't been paying attention, you have no idea what's going on.
The last guy in America who doesn't know what that means.
Yes.
Is hosting this event tonight. What a break.
There's also very clear what Chuck Todd's mission in that was. I mean, when I made the comment about, is this a debate? Is because he was cutting in not to ask a fault question, but just to make his point.
Yeah.
Like, you're not debating Bernie Sanders. You're not running for the presidency. You can ask him questions. But he just wanted to make points. And the whole point, the whole trade thing, like, Trump is closer to you than he is to Hillary on trade, so aren't you basically the same as Trump? Well, first of all, Sanders is not saying he wants a 45% tariff on China. He's not building walls and antagonizing Mexico and saying that if we don't have control over Chinese monetary policy, we're gonna attack them in some way. But to say that because both of them are more for protecting the American worker, I don't understand any shades of gray beyond that. Yeah, and he does the news 24 hours a day.
I'm just really disappointed in the way your twin is handling this town.
Right back into the town hall. And I believe Mary Beth Beasley has the next question, and it's on a topic we've already been touching on.
Hello, Senator Sanders. Thank you for taking our questions. I want to tell you I'm wearing a Buckeye necklace here. These Buckeyes were made in the USA, and I want to ask about trade. Obviously, as you were just speaking a minute ago against NAFTA, you've spoken against many trade agreements. I want to ask specifically, what changes would you make to these agreements, and what could you offer our trading partners that would motivate them to accept these changes?
Good. Look, trade is a good thing. We live in a global economy. But we cannot continue to have trade agreements written by corporate America that only benefit corporate America. We have to have trade agreements that are mutually beneficial, that work for American workers, that work for people around the world. And I think we can, in terms of agriculture, in terms of manufacturing products, I think we can do that. But this is what I do believe. It is simply unfair to ask American workers to be working against people, say in Vietnam, where the minimum wage is 65 cents an hour. That is unfair. Now, Chuck raised an important question. Are we concerned about poverty around the world? I am. But there are ways that we can help address those problems without seeing the loss of thousands of factories in this country. Since 2001, we have lost almost 60,000 factories and millions of jobs. So to answer your question in a broad sense, I believe in fair trade, not unfettered free trade, where American workers are forced to compete against desperate people.
You don't seem to be satisfied with that answer.
I'm just wondering how we can get concessions. I agree with the unfairness that we've seen, but to get our trading partners to agree to changes, aren't we going to have to, what can we offer? Do we offer things that would help poverty in those countries? I'm just wondering what would be the give and take.
There are a number of things you can do. What you're suggesting, even going outside of a trade agreement.
Okay.
I believe, for example, that instead of spending quite so much money necessarily in certain weapon systems, I would prefer to have poor people in the world know that schools and health clinics are being built by the taxpayers of the United States. I think that will go a long way to make people aware that our great country is on the side of those poor people, those children who are struggling. There are kids all over this world who die or get very sick because they don't have the medicine, which literally costs pennies a day to deal with diarrhea and other child illnesses. I want to see the United States lead the world, making sure that kids do not die when they should not die.
So essentially, to follow up here, so what you're saying is, if you want to renegotiate NAFTA,
Right, what's the difference?
you go to Mexico, and so the carrot on this is infrastructure projects for them.
Well,
I mean,
I
understand that, but I think that
let me just talk about Mexico, okay? In the early 1990s, I went to Mexico. And I went to the Maquiladora area in Mexico, which is a trading zone. And I saw these beautiful new state-of-the-art factories. And I said, I want to go meet the workers. I want to go visit the workers who are working in these factories. I want to go to their homes. You know what, Chuck? I couldn't go to their homes. You know why? And this is literally true. They lived in cardboard shacks. And back then, it's changed. They were making 25 cents an hour. That was the trade agreement. I'll never forget, the cardboard you get and you get a dishwasher, those type of, that's what they were living in. Those were jobs that used to be in America. And also, what we have seen in Mexico, a whole lot of people living in poverty. People were driven off their farms into the cities, part of the problem of immigration. So, yeah, I think when we develop trade policies, take a hard look at the needs of the people in those countries as well.
But I guess, how do you incentivize Mexico to redo this deal? They like NAFTA.
Well, it's the day Mexico has a government which is also, to a large degree, representative of their big money interest. I think we can negotiate contracts that work, trade agreements that work for both sides.
What is I guess I go back to, you have never supported a trade agreement. That we've had yet. I think, but there hasn't been one that you've been able to sign on to.
That's right. And you know what? I was right.
Is there anyone that could ever be drawn up?
Of course there is.
Then why hasn't it happened?
Why hasn't it happened? Because that's the broader issue.
Why hasn't Barack Obama been able to do it?
Well, Barack Obama and I love the president. He and I have worked together on many, many issues. He's wrong on the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Was he wrong on the Korea deal? Was he wrong on
Yes, he was, as a matter of fact. I just talked to the head of the UAW last week, and they supported the Korean trade agreement.
They signed on to the Korean trade agreement.
That's right. They made a mistake, and that's what they
And they think they made a mistake?
Yes, that's right. They lost many, many thousands of jobs. All right, so the point is, it gets back beyond trade. It gets back to why haven't we raised the minimum wage to above $7.25 an hour? Why don't we have pay equity in this country? Why is our infrastructure collapsing and Republicans want to give hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks to the top 1%? The answer is you got a Congress that works for wealthy campaign contributors and not for ordinary Americans, and our disastrous trade policies are part of that process.
All right, let me go to the next question here. We're going to a different topic. Michael Lacombe. Michael.
Senator Sanders, climate change is a threat that we all know must be addressed. But here in Ohio, thousands of us depend on coal and natural gas jobs. How can you assure us that the people of southern and eastern Ohio won't be abandoned and left behind as we transition to clean energy?
Very good question. Let's deal with the two facts that you mentioned. Number one, as a member of the Environmental Committee, I can tell you I've talked to scientists all over the world. Let's not mistake this. Climate change is real. Climate change is caused by human activity. Climate change is already doing devastating harm. And if we don't get our act together, more floods, more drought, more extreme weather disturbances, we have a planetary crisis that has to be addressed. Your point is there are a lot of workers who have jobs in one way or another connected to the fossil fuel industry. You're absolutely right. I have introduced legislation, which is the most sweeping, I believe, climate change legislation in Senate history. And what it takes into consideration is the need to protect those workers. It is not their fault that the fossil fuel industry is responsible for, in a large degree, climate change. So what we have got to do is provide a transition for them into other types of jobs. Now, here is the good news. The good news is that if we move to energy efficiency, and if we move to sustainable energies like wind, solar, geothermal, biomass, and others, we can create millions of jobs leading the world, selling products, talk about trade, selling products to China, India, Russia, that will help us significantly cut carbon emissions. But at the end of the day, as a people, we have got to understand we have a planetary crisis. Pope Francis, a few months ago, talked about this planet moving in a suicidal direction. We have a moral responsibility to future generations to address this. We can do it in a way that protects those workers who would be negatively impacted.
How quickly do we get rid of coal in this country under a Sanders presidency? How fast is that transition?
I think as soon as we can. Let me
10
be,
years, 15, 20?
I tell you. I think here is the good news. The good news is that we have seen a significant reduction in the cost of solar panels. In Iowa now, 30-40% of their electricity is generated from wind. Great potential in geothermal, I think, in many parts of this country. This is the way I look at it now. I know that people will disagree with me. In World War II, for example, the United States had to fight a war on two fronts in a very short period of time. And within 3 years, actually, we had essentially won the war. I look at climate change almost in military terms. I look at the fact that if we do not significantly reduce carbon emissions, there's going to be massive damage done to our country and this planet. But I have absolute confidence.
So you would marshal that kind of resource?
I think you got to look at it almost as a warlike. We are being attacked, and the attack is coming from climate change. And you know what that means? That's going to mean more extreme weather disturbances. Look at what's going on in California in terms of drought. You're going to have, the CIA tells us, more international conflict as peoples fight over limited natural resources. We do have. Now, what really shocks me, and should shock every student here, is you got a Republican Party, with few exceptions, that refuses to even acknowledge the reality of climate change, let alone do something about it. And you know what that's about? It's not that the Republicans don't understand science. It's they are dependent for their campaign contributions on the fossil fuel industry, which takes us to the most important issue, and that is the need to overturn Citizens United and end the corrupt campaign finance system. Which is why, by the way, if I may say so, I'm really proud. I don't have a super PAC. I'm not getting money from Wall Street or getting money from the fossil fuel industry.
You realize Secretary Clinton hit you for being a one-issue candidate because you take any issue and you do bring it back.
Well, let me tell you
what essentially Wall Street.
If you heard, as I'm sure you have.
Campaign. What do you tell him?
What I tell you, if you go to my speeches, there are an hour and 15 minutes. And maybe the one issue is my concern about the disappearance of the American middle class and the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality. Where Chuck,
but you do believe that singularly it is special interests that are at the root.
Do I believe that in this great country, our United States Congress is dominated by Wall Street and big money interests who have huge influence over the political process? Of course I do. I don't think that is in doubt. You got to not know anything about what goes on not to understand that. And I'm very proud. Let me repeat this. Secretary Clinton has super PACs. She gets many millions of dollars, let me finish, from Wall Street. I get $5 million individual campaign contributions, averaging $27 a piece. That is what the political revolution is about.
All right, I'm going to sneak in another break from those special interests that are supporting this town
If
hall.
we're paying you a salary, it's
So,
all right. So we will be right back.
Damn, I like that Bernie's calling him out on the corporate interests paying his salary. That's
he
awesome.
should. Chuck Todd's being a fucking dick to him
He
right
is being a dick, absolutely.
Chuck Todd, hashtag Raging Bottom 69. But here's the thing. It's Sanders, as much as you guys are angry at Chuck Todd, Sanders, it's the best performance I've ever seen from him. I'm an undecided voter, and I'm feeling the burn.
He's doing a great job.
He's on point. He understands the most important issue in the world is climate change.
Well, with that said, I love that you brought that up. And with that said, I now feel a little better about the fact that this is now the second Democratic town hall in a row. Because, there are people out there who are still undecided. Obviously, the majority of people that are usually on these panels on TYT have already decided, so it's good to hear that. I love that they had a lengthy discussion about climate change. I love how we talked about those who are employed by, these traditional energy companies will have a job if we start investing in renewable energy. I mean, you start investing in new companies that focus on renewable energy, those companies need jobs, right?
Yeah.
Or will create jobs, and we need people to fill those jobs.
Yeah.
So I love that, and I think that he made a lot of good points, including going after those trade deals that he refused to vote for. He was strong on that. He didn't let Chuck Todd make him seem like he was crazy for not voting for those trade deals.
I think, he repeated the Hillary Clinton thing, if you're a one-issue voter. Like, if you're a one-issue candidate, if your one issue was what I want a 3-day weekend, I think that we should be fighting for that as a country. If that was the only thing you talked about, okay, a little bit silly.
Yeah.
But, I'm like telling you about, that we need toilet paper, and you say the house is on fire. Oh, I say we should get new paint. You say the house is on fire. Why are you always going on about the fact that our house is on fire? Because it's fucking on fire.
Yeah.
It should be the one issue you tie everything back to.
And
he's like, oh, you care so much about the fact that all our politicians are bought when we're talking about politics.
And also,
it comes off as ridiculous.
It's not only ridiculous, it's disingenuous, because these moderators and Hillary Clinton both know that the reality is that this one issue impacts every other issue in our political system. They're very aware of that. But they're trying to frame him as if he's someone who doesn't really know about what's going on. He only cares about this one tiny little issue. No, he cares about the biggest issue that's impacting American politics today.
Yeah.
So you're right, Wes. I think he's doing a good job. The only thing is, look, a lot of these Democratic events, whether it's a debate or a town hall, are very wonky. They get into the nitty-gritty of policies, and for someone who's not a hardcore political junkie, I think you watch it and you get a little bored. Like, I'm trying to think of it from the perspective of the average American who doesn't do what we do for work.
But a lot of people are tuning in thinking, oh, all I've heard about Bernie is that he's some crazy communist. And then you hear him talking, you're like, yeah, it seems like he's watching out for me. And people like me. Yeah, and I like the way that he pitched climate change, the way he was framing it. I would have gone way farther. I mean, look, our country loves to be scared of shit. They love to be scared of terrorist groups and all that. Like, that is just going to be so much worse when these countries are falling apart because there's no water for people. The amount of
countries
civil
like
war,
the United States, because there's no
that
water
as well.
for people. Because what a lot of the press doesn't report is the overall aquifer that runs underneath the Midwest and that we used to grow a lot of our crops runs out of water.
In 2023.
That's not that far away.
Yeah, that's a great point. And that's
We've got
the incredible.
We've got some great lakes we could drain, right?
Yeah.
Sorry,
Anna.
I mean, that's the incredible thing, and I think it points to another failure of the media where they keep regurgitating this propaganda about how Muslims pose an imminent threat to us. What really poses an imminent threat to us is climate change, whether it's extreme weather, whether it's, Miami that's probably going to be underwater in the next century, and I think I'm being generous when I give you that timeline. I think it's
20 years.
Right. I mean, it's a disaster. And so Americans are unaware of what the real issue is, and it's because the media and politicians frame it as though climate change is still up for debate. It's not up for debate. Don't be an idiot, please.
Douchebags back.
And we're going to continue our town hall with Senator Sanders. Mitch Kashanik, I believe, has the next question. Mitch?
Welcome to Ohio State, Senator Sanders.
Thank you.
My question is, what do you say to the students like myself who may want a career in Wall Street or big business? It seems like you spend quite a lot of time demonizing big industries that I see my future in.
Well, I would like to be evil. You have the freedom as an American to work any place where you want and do what you want to do. many people gravitate to Wall Street, where, by the way, let me tell you, you can make a lot of money. And they pay pretty good. But this is what I believe, Mitch. I believe that in many respects, the business model of Wall Street is fraud. And I believe that what they did to this country during the financial crisis was unforgivable. They ripped off the American people. They sold subprime mortgage packages that were worthless. You may have noticed that just last month, Goldman Sachs paid a $5 billion fine to the United States government, and other banks did that as well. So what I want to give you a warning, Melvin, all right? If I'm elected president, what I have said is I think when 3 out of the 4 largest banks today are bigger than they were when we bailed them out when they were too big to fail, I believe we should break them up. I believe also that we should reestablish a 21st century Glass-Steagall piece of legislation. I think it's important for the American people to understand that the 6 largest financial institutions have assets of almost 60% of the GDP of this country. They issue 2/3 of the credit cards and about 1/3 of the mortgages. Now you tell me, if Teddy Roosevelt, the trust buster, were alive today, what would he say? I think he would say that they have too much power, too much concentration of wealth, and they should be broken up. I think they're a danger to this country. I really do. And politically, they have spent billions of dollars to get deregulated. I helped lead the effort against that deregulation. I'm sorry I lost, because if we had won that, maybe we would not have had that terrible crash. So you're free to go where you want. But if I win, you may have to get a job at a commercial bank rather than on Wall Street.
You're going to have a career change?
A community bank, rather.
Has he talked you out of this yet?
No, not quite.
All right. I want to ask you, though, about you demonize Wall Street donations. It's fair to say. You've said anybody that takes them, they're on the wrong side of the fight. Is that a fair distillation?
I don't like the word demonize, but look, here's the fact.
I mean, Sherrod Brown's a good progressive, is he not? What? Is Sherrod Brown a good progressive?
Sherrod Brown's a good friend of mine.
Yes. He's a good progressive? Would you call him that?
Yes.
He's taking Wall Street donations.
Fine. I mean, I'm not. Look, the point is, you have a corrupt.
He's doing the wrong thing.
Finance system.
Trump does the exact opposite of what you're supposed to be doing.
NBC won't work on Bernie. All right, talk about it.
You've given me a lot of work to do.
I know.
You budgeted a lot.
Even if it offends some of your commercial sponsors.
Fair enough.
Okay. Do we think as Americans that it's appropriate that one family, the Koch brothers, second wealthiest family in this country, and a few of their billionaire friends are going to spend $900 million in this campaign cycle to elect the wealthy and the powerful? Do we think it makes sense in America that Wall Street, which literally has endless supplies of money, is making massive contributions to candidates across the political spectrum? Okay? It's not a question of demonizing people. I believe in democracy. I believe that every person here has one vote. I do not believe that Wall Street, a handful of Wall Street, business people, or the Koch brothers should be able to buy elections. I feel passionately about that. And that is why I'm going to do everything I can to overturn Citizens United. And you know what else I'm going to do? We're going to try to move toward public funding of elections so that people, whether they're conservative or progressive, who run for office do not have to beg wealthy people for campaign contributions. Bottom line, you may disagree with me. I think anyone who objectively looks at politics in America understands that a handful of billionaire families have inordinate power over our political life as well as our economic life.
But you would recommend to any progressive, don't take Wall Street money. You would tell people don't do it.
The reason that good people end up doing it,
Barack Obama's done it, Hillary Clinton's done it, Sherrod Brown.
He gets it, dumbass.
I don't do it. And I think what we have shown in this campaign is if you have a progressive message raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, health care for all, making public colleges and universities tuition free, you know what? You can get campaign contributions from working people. You do not have to be dependent on Wall Street or big money interests.
You have certainly made that clear with your campaign. David Bowers has the next question. New topic.
Hi, Senator. I was and still am an early supporter of yours. I'm also a white guy who feels that America's racism tends to be pretty invisible to a lot of folks who look like you and me. Last summer, during the Netroots event, which your opponent didn't even attend, and during the Black Lives Matter action, I cringed a little when I felt you didn't really demonstrate an awareness of how race trumps class in today's America. Since then, you appeared to be growing and deepening a sense and awareness, as I think all of us who tend to not always see our privilege must continue to do. But the presidency is a pretty tightly controlled bubble. What steps will you take to ensure that you, as the world's most powerful white man, will continue to be exposed to challenges that help you deepen a sense of the racism that we breathe?
Well, David, I think you raise a fair point and a good point. I don't think it's, by the way, race versus class. I think it's both. I think when you have 35% of African American kids living in poverty, when you have real African American youth unemployment and underemployment at 51%, when you have more people in jail than any other country, disproportionately African American, you're talking about class as well. But in terms of race, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the fact that we have seen unarmed African Americans shot unjustly by police officers. That is unacceptable to me. And that is why I will lead the effort for real criminal justice reform, because the system is broken right now. Now, what does that look like? What it looks like, for a start, is keeping people out of jail by making sure that our kids, black, white, and Latino, have jobs and education rather than more jails and incarceration. It means that if any police officer in this country acts illegally, that officer will be held accountable. It means demilitarizing local police departments so they don't look like occupying armies. It means making police departments look like the diversity of the communities they're serving. It means rethinking the war on drugs, which have been bad for a lot of people, disproportionately African Americans. Give you an example. African Americans and whites, studies indicate, do marijuana at about equal levels, okay? Blacks are 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana than whites. It means getting a path out of jail when you serve your time so that you can re-enter society because you have the education and you have the job training. It means giving felons the right to vote. People who have paid their dues to society should not have their democratic rights stripped away from them. It means doing everything that we can as a people to fight institutional racism. Because I hear over and over again from the African American community, they're just not treated fairly within the job market and many other parts of our society. So those are just some. And if people have more questions, please go to my website, BernieSanders.com. We have a very long agenda on how we are going to combat the broken criminal justice system. So thanks very much, David, for that question.
Is he right? Have you evolved on this issue, or have you deepened your knowledge in the last 6 months?
I have. One of the very positive things and joys, if you like, about running for president of the United States is you meet all kinds of incredible people. You're a senator, you do meet a whole lot of people, but going around the country, sitting down with young people,
America.
You're seeing the real America, and I'll tell you, you end up feeling pretty good about it. You're in a room with young people who are in Black Lives Matter. You're in a room with young Latinos with tears coming down their eyes, fearful about being deported. You're in a room talking about people who have been with people who have been in jail and in fact went back to jail, and to talk about how we can prevent that. You're talking to women who are saying, why do I get 79 cents on the dollar compared to men? So it has been an extraordinary experience.
All right, Senator Sanders, we're going to sneak in another break from those special interests that are supporting this town hall. The Bernie Sanders breaks for an hour.
Yeah. All right. Who wants to jump in?
So I get what you were saying during the last break about the possibility that this sort of conversation, where it is wonky and all of that, could be boring to someone who's tuning in who perhaps doesn't care that much about politics. But I also think that while I don't always love the format, I think for Bernie Sanders it does tend to work. Like, he loves giving extended answers to these sorts of questions, the sorts of questions that regular people ask about even the last question about race, about the economics, climate change, and that sort of thing. He likes giving those. When you go to a debate and they're focusing on, well, like at the beginning of the town hall, 5 questions about Trump or 7 questions about what somebody said about Trump. Like, I don't think that he shines as much during that. Like, he wants to talk about the problems and how you fix them.
Yeah, I mean, the framing for those Trump questions were unbearable, and it sucks to start the town hall with that when in reality you should be focusing on the policy ideas. I think that overall Bernie's doing a great job. I think that he could have handled the Wall Street question a little better. He got a little mixed up toward the end when he said that the person who asked him the question, this young guy who wants to work for Wall Street, will probably end up working for a community bank if Bernie ends up winning the presidency. Before he said community bank, he said something else. Commercial bank, right? Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if that kid was pleased with the answer. I feel like his messaging wasn't clear enough there. What do you guys think about that?
I think his messaging should have been much clearer. You're going to be able to have a great career on Wall Street like people did from the 30s until the late 90s. People had great careers in banking. It was boring, but it also wasn't based on fraud. Yeah. So you're going to go back to doing normal banking that helps our economy. You're going to loan money to entrepreneurs that actually start businesses, that build our country, that create good jobs, instead of gambling with it in opaque markets that nobody knows what's happening. And then when the thing busts, we have to bail you out, and then we don't bail out Main Street. So you're going to have a great job at Wall Street, but it's not going to be just that, and a job that doesn't wreck our economy, because we're going to have safeguards back in place that kept banking safe for 70 years.
Yeah.
So that's sorry about that. That's a good point. I think that
less than 70 years. Yeah, I believe all this started in the 1970s with the changeover from the old white shoe firms into Milken and other people who tried to create the shareholder economy. That was like 79, 80, and then Reagan came in and backed them all up legislatively and in the executive branch in the 80s.
So this kid was he obviously wants to work for Wall Street. He wants to make sure that that career path is still available for him. And I think that you're right. I think that framing it with, you can still work for Wall Street, you're still going to be successful, you're going to do what you want to do, but we're just going to have some regulations in place so A, B, and C doesn't happen. I think that's a better way of doing it. The way that he framed it made it seem like he was kind of telling that kid, oh, you're screwed if you want to work on Wall Street.
Yes, that's what it sounded like.
And that's why the kid left kind of feeling unhappy with that answer, right?
You should say, I'm gonna take the fraud out of banking, just like you want to take steroids out of baseball. I'm not getting rid of baseball. You can still go be Babe Ruth. You just can't do it with steroids. You can still go be a big banker. You just can't do it with these fraudulent criminal rules.
Sorry, John.
Hours away from the big 5-state industrial state primary day, if you want to call it that. Throw in Florida as well. Senator Sanders, of course, this town hall. The next question comes from Spandon Shaw. Spandon, go ahead.
Good morning. The violence against religious and ethnic minorities around the country, especially in Trump rallies, is very disturbing. And to be honest, very scary, especially for someone who looks like me. And it is clear that these people who support Trump are not going to have a change of heart anytime soon, even if he doesn't get the nomination. My question to you is, if president, what is going to be your approach in uniting the country? And in particular, how do you address those people who relish in Trump's divisive rhetoric?
Well, thank you very much for that important question. And it really is sad that you have to ask that question. That should not be happening in America. I remember we did a rally in George Mason University a number of months ago. And a young Muslim woman, she was raising her hand. She just wanted to ask this question, so I brought her up. And that's what she said, that in America today, she was, in America today, she was frightened. This is not what our country should be about. People should not be frightened because they are Muslims, because they are dark complexioned, because they are Mexicans. And what Trump has done is really, really awful. So what do? For a start, we understand that unlike Trump, what America's strength has been, and it's an extraordinary strength, is bringing our people together. I'm Jewish. You're Muslim. You're Hindu. There you go, all right? But that's what America is, and we got Muslims here, and we got Latinos here. What an extraordinary opportunity. And we got African Americans all coming from different cultures, helping to create this great country and learning from each other. What a golden, wonderful opportunity. And that is what historically has always made us great. God only knows we have had problems with racism and bigotry in this country. But our vision has got to be to create a nation where we respect each other, where we love each other, where we do what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said. Do you remember what he said? Is we judge people based on their character, not on the color of their skin or their backgrounds. That's the America that I believe in. And I will do everything I can. Let me give you an example. Just a few months ago, I was with Keith Ellison. Keith is congressman from Minnesota. He is one of the few Muslims in the United States Congress. Keith and I went to a mosque in Washington, D.C., and sat down with Muslims there, just to make the point that we are not going to let the Muslim community or the Latino community or any other community feel isolated. We are going to stand together against bigotry and xenophobia in this country.
Thank you very much.
But I guess how do you look? We have a history that every time we have an economic anxiety, there is somebody takes advantage of it by saying blame that immigrant group, blame this one. I mean, it's been sadly about a 50-year cycle. Well, that this happens.
Chuck, it's gone on a lot longer than that.
No, but every 50 years, we always have a new group that we attack.
Yes, that's right. And it's gone on all over the world. That's nothing new. But the cheap, demagogic way of doing politics is to say, you see that minority over there? They're blacks, they're Jews, they're Latinos, they're Muslims. Let's hate them. Let's not focus on why we are where we are today. And that is why, I get criticized for it. But what I try to do is have a rational discourse about why the middle class of this country is disappearing, why people are angry that they're working longer hours for low wages and seeing almost all the income and wealth going to the top 1%. That's the kind of debate we have to have. And by the way, that does get us back to Wall Street. It gets us back to disastrous trade policies. It gets us back to the fact that we have not raised the minimum wage to a living wage. And what our campaign is about is bringing people together to address the real economic issues and not scapegoating minorities.
All right, we're going to sneak in one more break here. We're coming up to the end. The Bernie Sanders.
There are more breaks than questions. Was that one question?
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Anyway, I'm going to let John talk first because.
Go ahead, John. I don't really notice that. Oh, about the Wall Street thing. Yeah, I mean, the idea that. So the kid didn't like the response. I agree, he didn't like the response. He's one of the few people in the country. Fuck that kid. No, that's what I'm saying. He sees Hillary getting the donations, he's like, oh, well.
Yeah.
And, there's one of him for every 1,000 voters who are like, no, Wall Street fucked us. I want you to take it seriously. And if the kid really gets a thrill out of gambling, he can take a train into Connecticut and there's Mohegan Sun Foxwoods and he can gamble there with all the money he makes on Wall Street.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to do it with people's money.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know why. I think Bernie did a great job on that answer. I mean, the kid basically goes, "Hi, I'd like to make a lot of money for doing not that much and exploit people and rip them off because I went to the right college, and then someone hired me at 23 so I can make $1 million at 25."
Yeah.
I mean, fuck him.
Yeah.
Who cares what that guy fucking thinks? I said that. Hey, I had a guy like that. A guy like that went to my school. Okay, he went to Dartmouth, and then he worked at Goldman Sachs, and he worked at Google, makes millions of dollars. And his mom was like a high school guidance counselor. And then after having that job steadily till she was 70 years old, the school finally let her go, and he writes to all the other alumni, he goes, "I'm not giving a dime to the school because they let my mom go." And it's like, motherfucker, he made millions of dollars exploiting people, forcing them out of their fucking jobs, making a buck off people, and then your mom got a steady job for 40 years, and you got plenty of money to fucking support her.
Yep.
You want to fuck the school because she had to retire 5 years after most people are already forced out. People who work in that field, they have no fucking empathy, and fuck that guy, man.
All right, okay.
Fuck him being a banker.
You're definitely feeling the burn
Wow,
today. There's no
good for
question
you.
about that, and I love it.
Wow.
Yeah, and look, we need to do something to stop the predatory lending that's happening right now, especially within the housing market. We're seeing the exact same behavior again. Do your research, look into it. I'm obsessed with the housing market, and subprime mortgages are still being given out, specifically targeted toward minorities who don't make enough money to pay for those mortgages, right? So
it's not that they don't make enough money. They don't have the financial knowledge because they go to the public fucking school system, which teaches people nothing about financial literacy.
Well, that's absolutely
true.
true.
I am taking advantage
focus
of.
on that, absolutely. There's no question. But it's just incredible. It's not that they don't make enough money. It's just that they're given mortgages that these lenders know that they're not going to be able to pay back, right? These are mortgages where, of course, the interest rate is going to fluctuate. And so they have no idea what they're getting themselves into. So that's the issue.
But the bank does, because the bank collects insurance when they default. So the bank's getting their money either way, but they just got this sucker to pour a couple years' money in, then they get the house and they get the federal cash on their loan. It's insane. If people knew the reality of it, they'd be fucking outraged.
Yeah,
by the way, I have another metaphor that might be better than my fire one that Chiquiko Sayatome sent in. Another metaphor for you: if you catch a disease, then treating that disease instead of its many symptoms isn't being narrow focused. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great quote. Absolutely.
Yeah. But the problem is that in that metaphor, there's nobody who has a vested interest in you staying sick, except for actually the same as in the real world, the insurance company. It just wants to stay sick so they can keep getting money out of it.
You know, that's true. And, just one more second on that fucking kid.
Yeah.
Is if someone said, I'd like to practice medicine and I can't. I'd like to teach and I can't. I'd like to be a physicist and I can't. But I'd like to fucking rip people off as a banker?
Yeah.
Kim, man. Let's get back to
big states are voting tomorrow, and we're here in Columbus, Ohio, with Senator Sanders. So, Senator, I just wanted to wrap up with, it was an interesting piece of political satire on I think your new favorite program these days, Saturday Night Live. But it had an interesting, not so subtle message. Let me play the clip and get you to react to it on the other side.
You're fired up. You're angry. And I'm angry too. Because the top 10% of the top 1% control 90% of the wealth in this country. So thank you, audience, for lending your support to the biggest outsider Jew in the race. Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Obviously, the point being, she is taking your message and adopting it. You were joking about it earlier, but isn't that a sense? Do you feel a sense of victory on that?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think Secretary Clinton is catching on to where the American people are. And, she's evolved on the Keystone Pipeline. She's evolved on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. She has apologized for supporting the war in Iraq. She's apologized for supporting this homophobic DOMA legislation of the 1990s. So, yes, I suppose that one can get satisfaction from seeing her move closer to our positions. But I think what the voters have got to decide is, will she be apologizing 20 years from now for actions she takes today? What leadership is about is having the courage to do the right thing now, even if it's unpopular. And I think if you check my history, that's what I've done.
Well, I'm going to leave it there. Senator Sanders, thanks very much for participating. Thank you to a great group here.
Say why you're better than Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, and I think Bernie did a great job in listing all the different things that Hillary has either changed her position on or has apologized for. But again, whenever those issues come up, right, whenever Hillary is talking about things like income inequality, you have to understand that she changed her position or at least refocused her campaign on that issue because of political gain. I question her sincerity when it comes to those issues. I just wrote this pretty long piece in Raw Story about Hillary Clinton's very lucrative ties to the for-profit college industry. And it's disgusting. Bill Clinton made $16 million working as a chancellor for one of these for-profit college companies, right? And there's a bunch of different schools that falls under that umbrella. I get into details about why that's problematic, but essentially what happened was the State Department, I believe, or at least the federal government, was having some sort of dinner to talk about education policy. And Hillary had emailed someone and let them know, hey, we need to have this representative from this for-profit college present at this dinner about education policy. And then several months later, Bill Clinton gets that job from the same company that was represented at that dinner. Made $16 million off of that. For-profit colleges are a joke. They screw over our students. And the fact that Hillary talks about how she wants to make college debt-free in America is ridiculous when she has these close ties with the very schools that give out these bullshit degrees at insanely, high prices. I don't know. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time talking today for some reason, but you should read that piece. Raw Story. Anyway, there's Hillary. Let's take a look.
Well, thank you, Madam Secretary. And as you know, as an Illinoisan, that this is that room where Abraham Lincoln, there's Washington, Abraham Lincoln gave his House Divided speech. And so that was in 1858. How are we doing on that subject today?
Well, we could use that speech again from a lot of leaders as well as citizens, because there's a disturbing amount of divisive rhetoric in this campaign that is playing on people's fears and really engendering a lot of mean-spiritedness, bigotry, that I think is, not only bad for our politics, it's bad for our nation, and we need to stand up against it. We've had periods in our history, as you know so well, being such a history buff, Chris, where people have strong feelings. I totally accept that, and there's even reason for some people to be frustrated, angry, fearful, but that's when leaders are supposed to be trying to find common ground, bringing people together, not flaming the discontent and setting up us versus them. And I fear that's part of what we're seeing in this campaign this time.
You've called Donald Trump a political arsonist.
Yes.
Do you believe that he's responsible for igniting all this people throwing punches at each other? They're not just yelling at each other, they're waving placards. They're fighting out there.
Well,
is he responsible?
I do hold him responsible. I think if you go back now several months, he's been building this incitement. He has been, leading crowds in jeering protesters. He has been talking about punching people in the face. He's been encouraging the manhandling of both, people who are attending as well as journalists on the floor and in the stands of his events. So I think what happened on Friday in Chicago is tragically a natural outgrowth of that kind of incitement. And, look, all of us in public life, and you've covered all kinds of people running for office, in office, we all get protested against. Somebody's always upset about something. The other day I had a man who's convinced that cell towers are causing, cancer in your salivary glands. Maybe someday we'll find out he's right. But at the moment, he's unfurling flags and he's yelling and screaming. We all have to deal with that, and you try to deal with it calmly and peacefully, and don't tell people, hey, do something to him, take him out, beat him up. And, that's what leadership requires. You're supposed to be calming people down to try to find solutions to problems.
Would you encourage a young person or a person of any age now to go out, if they did believe that Trump was saying terrible things, to go out and protest him, challenge him publicly? Would you encourage them to do that?
Well, what I would encourage them to do is to protest peacefully, protest in the most effective way, which is actually getting people to come out and vote against him. That's how we...
How about disrupting?
I think disrupting, you have to be really careful that it's done in a way that is peaceful, that is respectful insofar as that's possible. So, yes, people who are inside an event that they know is going to be, unfortunately, filled with, folks who are going to be against them, they should be careful about that. I think, walking with signs, engaging in peaceful protest outside of venues probably makes more sense, but the best thing they can do is organize against anybody who incites violence, who is belligerent, who is dividing our country, and vote them down.
Let's look at two American politicians on this little screen here now, and everybody will know what's going on, and how they, in very different ways, addressed political and racial tenseness.
Right.
What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, and a feeling of justice toward those who still suffer within our country.
Well, if you see somebody getting ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of them, would you? Seriously. Okay? Just knock the hell. I promise you, I will pay for the legal fees. I promise. You know what they used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this? They'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks. I'd like to punch him in the face, I'll tell you.
Bobby Kennedy, talking to people in a tough neighborhood in Indianapolis the night that Dr. King was killed, he told them, a white guy had to come and tell them. And Trump, compare and contrast.
Well, you couldn't have a starker contrast between a leader, a statesman, a visionary, someone who, was willing to take on the sorrow and the burden of the assassination of Dr. King, to talk to people who were distraught and just absolutely heartbroken over what had happened. And you have someone like Trump, a demagogue, a showman, an inciter, who is actually fanning the flames instead of trying to, as we saw in that clip from Bobby Kennedy, trying to bring down the passions so that people could work together to find common ground. That's what we need today in America.
He started this number by saying that President Obama wasn't born in this country, that he was a illegal immigrant, basically, who snuck in some weird way of going from Kenya to Honolulu and faking the birth records and everything. Do you think that's one reason why African Americans as a group have really, really turned on him? There's something that I haven't been able to quite figure out, but denying the first American president who was African American to be legitimate would seem to be grounds for hostility.
Yeah. Well, I think it's that plus other feelings. I think certainly the fact that Trump led the campaign to try to delegitimize President Obama from the very beginning. He used this phony issue about where he was born. There was definite proof. We knew where he was born. It didn't matter. Trump kept beating that drum and kept trying to, again, incite people to be hostile toward the president, who happened to be the first African American president. That sent a lot of signals, not just to African Americans, but to all Americans. Wait a minute, what's going on here? But I think it's more than that. When you are inciting mob violence, which is what Trump is doing in those clips, there's a lot of memories that people have. They're in the DNA. People remember mob violence that led to lynching. People remember mob violence that led to people being shot, being, grabbed, being mistreated. And it's something that has a deep, almost psychological resonance to people who've ever been in any position of feeling somewhat fearful, somewhat worried. We've come so far in our country that to be here in this state capitol, in this room where Abraham Lincoln gave that speech about a house divided, and to see that someone who is vying to be president of the United States is using divisiveness, is stoking fear, is pointing fingers, scapegoating against all kinds of people, I think is so dangerous. And yes, it's wrong, it's offensive, it's also dangerous.
When you were a young girl in Illinois, somebody was bullying you in the new neighborhood you moved into.
That's true.
And your mother said go out and deal with this person physically, and you decked this big bully woman. You're going to have to deal with that similar situation if you win the nomination. You had Trump calling you a criminal.
Yes.
He's turning his fire on you.
He's going to ask where I was born.
Wow. Well, I don't know. Maybe not.
Chicago, Edgewater Beach Hospital.
Yeah. I mean, so far he hasn't been five of her supporters and singers from his supporters. That's a difference.
I have my birth certificate ready.
You might have to flash
triplicate in case anybody wants.
You might get carded.
Yes, that would
be nice to be carded.
Nice.
You went to Wellesley.
I did.
What would have happened if you'd gone to Trump University?
I would have been out a lot of money, from what I hear, and nothing to show for it.
You said something rather odd the other day. You said you're not a natural politician, like your husband. Who is it? Everybody knows, certified national.
Yeah.
What is the difference between you and him? Forget Trump, Obama, President Obama. What's it? Bill Clinton, I've seen him at a million occasions. He won't leave.
Yeah.
The occasion's over, and you see him. He's working the room. He doesn't want it to end.
Yeah.
What is that DNA? You talk DNA. What is it in a being that makes him never want to leave the crowd?
For Bill, and obviously I've now known him much more than half my life, he is, someone who is so curious, almost in a way that I don't know anybody else. He is constantly, seeking out people, waiting to hear their stories, trying to make connections between, something he's heard in one place and something he might hear in another place. He used to come off of rope lines at the end of big events when he was running for for governor, running for president, obviously. And I've learned so much. And he would tell me stories, and sometimes it would just be a 30 or 60-second interchange, but he could really derive from that something about the person in front of him. And I learned an enormous amount. Those 18 years, the wonderful years that we spent in Arkansas, going to all kinds of events, from tiny events to big events, listening to people, learning what was on their minds. When I moved to Fayetteville, Arkansas to teach at the law school, and really it was because I was trying to figure out whether...
How do you say that again?
Fayetteville. I was trying to figure out whether we were going to get married or not, because, that was the big issue for me. So I moved there. I'm teaching at the University of Arkansas Law School. And I noticed that one of my students hasn't shown up for a couple of days, a couple of classes. So I call information. We used to have information in those days. I called information, and I said, I'm looking for, John Smith. The operator says to me, he's not home. I said, what do you mean? He's not home, he went camping. I mean, it was just such an incredible experience where people's stories, their lives were so intertwined. And, I think Bill is someone who was brought up hearing stories from his, family, and just lived in, that great storytelling tradition. So I am in great admiration of happening right now. I'm somebody who believes strongly in public service, in doing all the good I can for all the people I can for as long as I can. I enjoy it, but I'm not deluding myself. I mean, I'm not speaking in poetry. I'm not bringing people to fever pitches of incredible admiration. But every time I've had a job, I do it well, and I do it in my own way, and I produce results for people. When I ran for the Senate, you covered that. I ran for the Senate.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, she can't win. I won.
You were going to take on Rudy Giuliani.
Well, that's why I was recruited, because people didn't think anybody else could beat him. And then 6 years later, I won by an even bigger margin because I did the job. I'm somebody who believes, okay, you have a job to do. You want to help people. You want to produce results. And maybe that is more governing in prose than campaigning in poetry, but that's what I want to do as president.
Well, we'll come back. It'll get tougher. We'll be back. When we come back, let's talk about the race for the Democratic nomination. Senator Sanders, hell of a race.
Oh yeah, maybe we should talk about the primary that she's engaged in right now. That would be a good thing to switch to for a little while.
When is he going to ask some questions? I don't know if Chris Matthews is aware of this. Actually, he is aware of it. He's very aware of it. Listing all the different ways you agree with Hillary so she can elaborate on how much you guys agree on things is not the right format for a town hall. I know you love the fact that they chose Chris freaking Matthews to be the person who asks the questions to Hillary during this town hall is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. So far, it's been a perfect platform for her to talk about how awesome she is. She hasn't been challenged once. Okay, it's been, 15 minutes? She hasn't been challenged.
Well, you can't challenge her. He's too busy smiling and laughing.
I gotta say, you're both totally wrong on this. In the sense of what it's going to do for Bernie. Okay, yeah, absolutely.
You're so
if Chris Matthews, if Matthews could get down on his hands and knees right now and lick and suck her toes, he'd do it. Okay.
I'm glad you toes.
But Chuck Todd's harshness to Bernie forced him to actually talk about his positions in his campaign and to push back against the media narrative. She's not able to do any of that. And if you look at average Democratic primary voters, they're not going to go, fuck, man, I love Chris Matthews and Chuck Todd. They're not thinking that.
No,
they're thinking these guys are lying scumbags who work for the system, and there's Hillary laughing and having a good time and not talking about any of her positions at all.
I think that there are things that play out subconsciously that we're not giving enough credit to, okay? If you are a voter who might not be the most informed, okay, because you're busy and you have things going on, you're not that focused on politics, you're going to watch this town hall and you're going to see Bernie constantly defending himself. You're going to see him, getting asked all these tough questions and being antagonized. And then you're going to see Hillary sitting there and, using flowery language about how peaceful and loving she is and how she's really going to represent you. Like, they're going to see that and they're going to be like, what's up with that older dude? He seems like he's really defensive. Yeah. But Hillary seems like she knows what she's talking about.
Okay, you're right. Non-thinking people may may come to that conclusion. Because I think even people that are uneducated about a lot of the issues or anything else, I think they're going to see there. And look, when we talked about wonkism earlier, I don't think Bernie was wonkish at all. Wonkish is like, I supported the Gang of Eight and the Glass-Steagall and the whatever loophole.
I shouldn't have used that.
And he was like, look, here's what I think. It's 4 really simple sentences that have like a subject, a verb, and an object in it.
And they're about people.
And it's not about like, let me throw 50 sentences together so you start to zone out and you're like, there's something in the oven that I have to check on by the time I'm done with my answer. I think and Chuck Todd's hostility to him forced him to give those answers. So I don't think Matthews is doing her any favors right now.
Well, also consider the fact that, when Chuck Todd and Bernie Sanders were getting into the trade discussion, it got very confusing. Like, we followed the news, and Chuck Todd's framing of these questions
fundamentally dishonest. You're right.
Dishonest. And so, I don't know. I worry about us being in a bubble and thinking that everyone thinks the way that we do, right? And I think that would be a mistake. I think that some people are going to watch this and they're just going to think, all right, Hillary knows what she's talking about. She doesn't seem like she needs to defend herself at all. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe Chris Matthews will surprise us and ask us, ask questions about maybe the Nancy Reagan gaffe regarding AIDS. I don't know.
We'll see. If she wants to get a drink after, who doesn't
That's definitely a challenging question.
I'm waiting to see what are you wearing.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I am amazed. Maybe I shouldn't say I'm amazed, but I have to say Senator Sanders has pulled some big victories. He won in Iowa. He's won in Michigan.
No. I won in Iowa.
That's right, you did.
I hope that stays in the show.
That'll stay in the show. Why did I think the other? Let's talk about Michigan.
It was very close.
You're getting me in a mood here. Let's go to Michigan.
That's dangerous.
Michigan, all those numbers look really good for you. And I was thinking Tamar's numbers look good for you in most cases. Missouri and here, and maybe not Missouri. Ohio's okay, and Florida looks good. Do you trust the polls anymore?
No, honestly, I don't, Chris. And in large measure because I think pollsters are trying to do the best job they can, but it's very difficult to poll now. If you have only online information, that's been proven to be often unreliable. If you try to call landlines, you miss everybody with cell phones. If you call cell phones, you miss people often because they don't answer. So no, I think it's very difficult now to predict the outcome of elections. And somehow we're going to have to get better at it because people do rely on that information.
Well, let's talk about young people in their even as old as their early 30s. People don't have phones. They don't have landlines. Look at the numbers for you though in Michigan. Here it was: 80% of people under 30 voted for Senator Sanders. He also got 57% of the whites. I hate doing things by race, but we do. And what do you think happened there?
Well, first let me put it in context because that night I actually won 100,000 more votes than Senator Sanders because of my huge victory in Mississippi, where I did win both white and black voters. On Super Tuesday, other than Vermont, I won a majority of white voters as well as black voters. So I think that you can focus on one state and kind of miss the big picture because where we stand today, before the primaries tomorrow, I've gotten far more votes than anybody else running on either side. I've gotten 5 million votes, 600,000 more than Trump, 1.6 million more than Bernie Sanders. So I feel really good about where I am in this campaign. And of course, the number of delegates that I have won is also considerably higher than Senator Sanders. So I have a broad, inclusive coalition, which I think puts me in a very good position to be able to get the nomination and to go against Trump or whoever they nominate.
Well, let's talk about the tough part, the trade sensitive states. Ohio is one. Missouri is always historically against trade.
Right.
Here we are in Illinois. Michigan's tough, of course. You've seen that. How do you deal with that? Bernie Sanders is known as an anti-trade guy. He's opposed to all the trade deals. You've been for most of them. You were for TPP initially. How do you deal with the fact that to a lot of working people, trade is the enemy?
I really understand that, and I think that we've had a number of years of experience now about what trade can and can't do in our globalized economy. So last night in Ohio, I said, look, I want to set the record straight. Yes, I did vote against the biggest multinational trade agreement when I was in the Senate. It was called CAFTA. I voted against it. I'd learned some things since the 1990s, and I put that to work. I also said that I hoped I would be able to support TPP, but I actually waited until I knew what was in it, and then I stated my opposition
But you said it was exciting, innovative, ambitious, groundbreaking, cutting edge, high quality, and high standard.
Before it was finished. I hoped that we could deal with currency manipulation and a lot of the other problems that our country and our working people have faced. It turned out when it was all said and done, it didn't meet my standards, and that's why, just like I voted against CAFTA, I've said I'm against TPP. But here's what's happening, Chris. You know, before coming here, I was in Chicago, and I was meeting with a group of workers who are most likely going to lose their jobs at the big Nabisco factory on the south side of Chicago. 600 really good jobs. And I met with some of the workers. And what this company is doing is taking those jobs, sending them out of the country, and turning around and basically saying to the workforce, too bad, we're done. You know, we're not going to be there for you. When that company and its predecessors had received millions and millions of dollars in taxpayer benefits. So we've got to figure out how to get some leverage against some of these companies. And I am proposing we have a clawback. If you took any money from the local, state, or federal government to put in a plant, to upgrade the plant, to do anything to the plant, you have to pay it back. That's how I think we've got to get leverage on these companies. So when they do the cost benefit, on the cost side is, hey, we're going to owe back the money that we took telling the people of this state or city we were going to be there when, hey, we're not, we're moving out.
How come what we were taught in school, that trade is good? All the economists thought it was a comparative advantage. The countries that are good at one thing make it. The ones that are not so successful do something else, and you all trade and everybody wins. What went wrong with that theory?
I think what went wrong is that we have countries now that are not shy about putting a heavy thumb on the scale. They are supporting their own industries. In China, for example, there's no free market. That's just an illusion. It's not a market economy. You have state-owned enterprises. You have the government being used to threaten companies. When I was a senator from New York, I was always in some kind of controversy with the Chinese government because they were coming and threatening New York companies, and I would go to bat for New York companies. So you have in Europe, in a more refined, genteel way, you have in Asia, a more rough and tumble way, a set of trade conditions where we end up having the only, in my view, really free trade economy. And we've been able to manage that until relatively recently. Now, because of competition with increases in technology, automation, and the like, we've got to really fight for our jobs. And fighting for our jobs means, yes, improving our skills, yes, incentivizing advanced manufacturing and clean and renewable energy, but it also means sending a really clear message. You aren't going to mess with us. We're going to do what is necessary to make sure you're not dumping steel, you're not stealing our intellectual property, and you're not walking out on communities where we've given you money, in effect, to stay. So I'm taking a very tough line on this. I think we need to. I'm not sure we would have a decade, 20 years ago, because the situation was different, but the way I look at it now, we've got to really stand up.
Are you the same as Bernie Sanders now?
No.
On trade?
No, because you know what? I know you have to trade with the rest of the world. We have like less than 5% of the world's population. We have to trade with the other 95%. So,
and you don't think he agrees with that?
Well, I don't know. His position is so anti. He's against things before they're even finished, before they're read. He was against not only TPP before it was completed, he was against the Paris Climate Agreement before it was signed. He just is reflexively against anything that has any international implication. My view is let's get tough and smart and effective, but we can't shut the door to the rest of the world. We've got to trade with the rest of the world. I want us exporting more. I want more good jobs with rising incomes in America, and I think that's the way to do it.
So, speaking of being tough, are you a hawk?
No, I'm a smart
Are you a hawk? That's a tough question. Are you a hawk?
Smart. Were you smart about Iraq, endorsing the president's position on Iraq? Did you believe ever that Saddam Hussein, when you had to cast that vote to authorize the war in Iraq, did you ever believe that Saddam Hussein had nuclear weapons?
I did.
Who told you?
Well, I know at the end of the Clinton administration, there was a very strong sense that he was reconstituting his nuclear weapons program. And I like to remind people that at the end of the 90s, there was a sense of the Congress passed that my opponent, Bernie Sanders, voted for, basically talking about regime change in Iraq because of the threat of potentially nuclear, biological.
Stuff.
Well, Bernie Sanders voted for it.
I don't know why he did it.
Well, Chris, I'm just telling you that that was the prevailing opinion, and not all. You know, look, I've said it was a mistake because.
No, I want to know about the facts because if you were told by somebody that he had nuclear weapons, they weren't telling the truth. Because Mike Morrell, who's the chief CIA briefer on the subject, told me on my show that they never told anybody because he said we had no evidence they had nuclear weapons. So who, if it wasn't the CIA, told you they had nuclear weapons?
Well, what was going on was a continuing intensive inspection program. Hans Blix, remember Hans Blix?
Remember it all.
And Hans Blix and his team of inspectors were trying to get to the bottom of this. Now, here's what was misleading, is that Saddam Hussein could have ended it immediately. He could have said, come anywhere, look anywhere, we have nothing. But he didn't choose to do that. And so the inspectors were racing to get to all the sites that they were worried. Because remember, at the end of the first Gulf War, we did find evidence of a nuclear weapons program. Then we had a number of years where we were flying a no-fly zone over Iraq and where we saw him diverting a lot of money into not just building palaces, but building, we thought, programs.
Dick Cheney's all over the country back in the fall of 2002 saying Saddam has nuclear weapons. Not a nuclear weapons program, nuclear weapons, even though the CIA never told him that. The question is Donald Trump right when he said they lied?
Well, you know, I think that what Mike Hayden and others have said is that it was an intelligence failure. Now, I don't know.
No, but they never said they had nuclear weapons. How can it be a failure?
Well, they led some people to believe that.
Yeah, but not with evidence.
Well,
not with evidence. You didn't have evidence they had nuclear weapons, did you?
What we had was
You never had evidence of nuclear weapons.
No, but that was because the inspection program had not been completed. And where I stood, I believed George W. Bush when he said, we are going to let the inspectors finish the job. This vote will give diplomacy, which is what it seemed to me he was offering, made a lot of sense.
Did he seem the diplomatic type, W?
He seemed to be someone who, in my opinion, at least rhetorically, that speech he gave in Cincinnati was aimed at saying, we're going to let the inspectors finish. Now, he didn't let the inspectors finish. And that's where I made a mistake, because if he had let the inspectors finish, what Blix and others argue is they would have been able to prove to the world. So if there had been any doubt, whether manufactured or believed, it would have been ended. And that's why, you know, I've said repeatedly it was a mistake for me to
Why was Bernie Sanders right and you were wrong? What do you think was in him that allowed him to see what you couldn't see?
Well, I don't know, because he voted, as I said, for the regime change resolution. Well, it was only a few.
Rhetorical.
It was only a few years earlier, and you know, look, that was a mistake, and I've said it was a mistake. And I had good friends like Vice President Biden who were with me, and I had good friends who were on the other side. And I think part of what certainly influenced me is after 9/11. You know, I went to New York with Chuck Schumer the next day, my fellow senator.
Knock it off.
Only plane in the sky, and we flew over Ground Zero, and we saw the devastation. And we were briefed fully on all of the threats that were still out there. We get back to Washington. I go and see then Senator Byrd, get him to commit to helping New York. Because the first request out of the White House was for $20 billion for the Pentagon, for Homeland Security, not a penny for New York. So I went and said, look, we have to get money for New York. When I went to the White House, there were about 4 of us senators, the 2 from Virginia, the 2 of us from New York. And I knew that the Republicans in the White House and in the Senate didn't want to rebuild New York, or at least they weren't willing to put money into it. So I'm sitting there in the Oval Office, and Bush says to me, "What do you need?" I said, "I need $20 billion to rebuild, New York." He said, "You got it." And he was good to his word. So my experience with him on something of great import to our country was positive, because literally that same day I get back to the Capitol, and the Republicans are trying to take that money away. We kept calling the White House. Bush kept saying, "I gave them my word. I'm going to stick with it." So, I had a different set of experiences.
No, but we have 100,000 people dead in Iraq because of that war that we started. We invaded. We did the war. We won the war. And then you went into Libya and you supported regime change.
That's very different.
But why do you keep wanting to do these things of regime change? What's in your thinking that says the United States government has some right and duty to go to Middle Eastern countries and knock off their leadership?
Well,
and I think you were more aggressive on knocking off Bashir Assad too.
Well, let me tell you what I believe, and then you people can make their own judgment. I've said Iraq was a mistake. I've said that what I thought the strategy was, which was to let the inspectors finish and to find out, and if necessary, to be able to then put pressure of a different kind on Saddam Hussein, wasn't allowed to go forward. So that we know. Libya was very different. I think it's conflating the two does a disservice.
But the principle of regime change, what do you make of it?
No, look,
constantly trying to knock off their leaders.
No, that is just an overstatement that doesn't really reflect the situation.
Don't you support knocking off Bashir Assad?
I think that given the bloodshed he has spilled, that would be a good outcome, but Americans aren't going to do it. That's not us doing it. In Libya, you had a dictator who had American blood on his hands. Remember, Reagan tried to knock him off, as you recall, because you were working in the Congress, missed when he tried. When he said that he was going to track down his people and murder them, the Europeans and the Arabs came to us and said, "You've got to help us," because what they feared is what we see in Syria. What they feared was an out-of-control civil war on their shores, right across the Mediterranean, right next to Egypt, right next to the rest of the Middle East. Remember, we had those countries helping us in Afghanistan in our very big coalition. Now, when somebody that has helped you, their people have died, they have expended their treasure to help us, come and say, "This is personal to us." We in Europe, we in the Middle East. Is the United States supposed to say, "You know what, that's not our problem"? And they can say to us, "Yeah, Afghanistan wasn't our problem either," but that's not the way you work with allies and way you build coalitions. So what did we do there? We provided our unique abilities, and they ran most of the air missions. They were really very much involved in helping to, cordon off Libya and in eventually defeating Gaddafi and his forces. Now, is Libya perfect? It isn't. But did they have 2 elections that were free and fair where they voted for moderates? Yes, they did. So, changing from a dictator who has hollowed out your country to something resembling a functioning state, and even hopefully more of a democratic one, doesn't happen overnight. And we've got to continue to support the Libyan people to give them a chance, because otherwise you see what's happened in Syria with the consequences of millions of people flooding out of Syria, with more than 250,000 people killed, with terrorist groups like ISIS taking up almost a huge swath of territory, as big as some of the states in that area. So yes, Libya was a different kind of calculation, and we didn't lose a single person. We didn't have a problem in supporting our European and Arab allies in working with NATO, and now we got to support
people are going to like that. Quickly, of the whole history of the United States in your lifetime of knocking off leaders, whether it's Mossadegh in Iran, or it was Arbenz in Guatemala, or knocking off Allende in Chile, or knocking off Patrice Lumumba in the Congo, or knocking off Trujillo, or who else have I missed? We've been doing this for a long time. That's why I'm skeptical. But
Honduras,
all those
Secretary of State,
all those attempts to change the history of other countries. Should we be doing that kind of thing?
Well, I don't think
knocking off leaders.
In the vast
we knocked him off.
In the vast majority of cases, the answer is no. But there's always these historical games you can play. If somebody could have assassinated Hitler before he took over Germany, would that have been a good thing or not? You cannot paint with a broad brush. individual situations, and most of the ones you named are ones that I think in retrospect did not have a very defensible kind of calculation behind them. But I think it's a mistake to say you can't ever, prevent war. You can't ever save people. If there had been a way to go after the leaders of the massacres in Rwanda to stop that before 800,000 people were killed, what would we have done? We do, as you know very well, target terrorists. We target them because we believe that they are plotting and planning against us, our friends, and our allies. Now, they may not be a head of state, but they are very well the head of a terrorist group. So these are tough, hard choices. That's why I wrote a whole book called Hard Choices about some of
you're ready for the role of Commander-in-Chief already. Anyway, back with more of our special MSNBC Town Hall with Hillary.
What was the whole point of all those questions then?
To be fair to him, he asked.
Those were tough questions. Yeah, and then he seemed to miss the whole point of what he was revealing there by saying, "Oh, well, looks like you're ready."
Right. Exactly.
She was. She was, I think, not being. She was being disingenuous about the lead up of what happened to that. Like she's acting like she's doing that thing, right? Like he could have. He didn't have the weapons of mass. What are you talking about?
What's interesting is that she talks about, the inspector. Like they voted to invade Iraq with this notion that the inspectors will come back to them after the vote to prove whether or not the WMDs exist, and then the inspectors didn't do that, and so that was her mistake. But here's the thing: if I were, voting in Congress as to whether or not to start a preemptive war, I would say, hey, you know what? I need some hardcore intel to prove that there are WMDs here. We just got attacked by Osama bin Laden, who has nothing to do with Iraq in the situation,
also,
right? So, go ahead.
The argument could be made. I mean, there are ways around this, certainly. But the idea is, if you're saying you're going in, you're moving in tons of ground troops because you believe they definitely have weapons of mass destruction, doesn't really make sense, because the whole point of having, in a lot of cases, weapons of mass destruction is to stop that sort of invasion. Invading in that way sort of implies that you don't think they have weapons of mass destruction, because they could either use them against your soldiers as they're being assembled, which is dangerous, certainly, or against nearby targets of opportunity in the region, like Israel, theoretically. If moving in implies you didn't think they had any.
It also implies that there weren't.
No, why is that?
I just remember when we were moving people over there was a near certainty people felt that we would be hit with chemical weapons. I remember
chemical weapons.
I totally agree. Stop. Let me go back. I lived in New York on 9/11. On the 12th, a friend of mine was the Undersecretary of Defense for Central Asia. She used to work for Bob Dole. I had dinner with her like 2 weeks before. She calls me up the next day. She goes, "We think there's a nuke in the harbor in New York." It's not like a random person who's like, the administration thought there might even be a nuclear weapon in New York. And then what happened was you had the vice president, Cheney, and his henchmen basically conducting a psychological op using Judith Miller and many members of the press to try and sway the American public towards this thing. I can forgive Hillary Clinton for thinking that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction when her husband was president, because that's what our intelligence services were telling people. Now, and I can believe her in the immediate aftermath of 9/11 for thinking something like that. But I can't believe that she thought that in the fall of 2002, moving into 2003, because it was pretty much out there that there probably weren't any weapons of mass destruction.
And so who put that out there? Like, what kind of intel did we have that showed that there were no WMDs in Iraq?
We just didn't have anything specific.
Yeah.
We didn't know anything.
I remember I was also alive back then before we went to war in Iraq, and I remember it was the biggest anti-war rallies in the history of the world. And I remember there were lots of people, including me, a jagoff comedian, who knew 100% this war was a lie. So people who didn't know that are unbelievably naive or completely corrupt and lying now. And I think the latter. And I think that they went along with this because going along with the war is good for politics. It's never bad, and here we go.
We're back in the old state capital of Illinois, where Lincoln once worked. Many years he was here, about 20 years, as a legislator and as a lawyer. His information will help us all today. Go ahead. First question.
Hi, my name is Summer Ghazni. Right now, a lot of college students are backing Bernie Sanders. So I want to know, what specifically are you going to do for college students who are graduating with a large amount of debt?
I'm really glad you asked that, Summer, because I have a plan I call the New College Compact, which not only will make college more affordable with debt-free tuition for students, but will also refinance the student debt that young people already have. I want to refinance it, saving thousands of dollars for people who have graduated but are weighted down by this debt. I want to move people into what are called income contingency repayment programs, so that you pay back as a percentage of your income. And I want to put a time certain to end your payments. So I think actually my approach is more comprehensive and will do more for people. It's affordable.
That's a lie.
It's the needs that folks have, and I think it will lift the debt off of millions of Americans.
Next.
Chris Matthews should know that's a lie. We should have looked at her policies. He should fucking know. He doesn't fucking know. He hasn't read the policy.
The mayor of the city of
Yes, you
Springfield.
are. Yes, you are.
Well, thank you. I want to express our welcome and our thanks for coming to Springfield, Illinois, the home of Abraham Lincoln, where usually people come together to solve the world's problems and our own problems. But my dad, he grew up in Vienna, Austria, and as a teenager he had to flee there because of Hitler taking over. And when they came to America, before they could enter, they had to have a sponsor as immigrants, which helped protect the United States as well as make sure that the family wasn't a burden on the government. As president, what steps would you take to put in place to make sure that immigrants are screened properly so it does keep our America safe, and as well they don't become a burden on our government?
Well, Mayor, first of all, thanks for the welcome. I'm happy to be back in Springfield. I think the first time I came to Springfield was in 5th grade, as I remember. A lot of laughter, recognizing that's when we all came to learn about our history, learn about President Lincoln. I think when we talk about people coming to the United States, they have to go through a process where they are vetted and screened. That often is quite extensive and time-consuming, as it must be, to gather the information to make sure that no one, insofar as we can tell, is being permitted to come into our country who would do us harm and would possibly be some kind of additional burden. The way that the system works now, for people coming, seeking asylum, who are refugees, they have to have a sponsor. It's usually a sponsoring organization. Very often churches and other faith groups are the sponsoring organization, but they have to pledge that they're going to look out for the individual and the family who are coming after being vetted and screened. So I agree that we've got to have a very thorough, effective process on the screening end and on the receiving end, so that there is an organization we can look to that is sponsoring people, such as what happened with your father. And I have said that that's what I support, and I will be sure that as president, I will do everything I can to make it work as effectively as possible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to be right back with more of our town meeting with Hillary Clinton.
All right, guys, we need to take a break as well, so let's take a quick break and we'll be right back.
about your opponent, the one you have right now in tomorrow's primaries. I've talked to Howard Dean, known him a long time, as you have, the former governor of Vermont, former DNC chair. And I asked him about Bernie Sanders because he's been with him for all these years. And he said Bernie's the same as he was 40 years ago. So it's the same approach, same philosophy, democratic socialism, very much comfortable with that, and has never really changed his tune. You're more protean over your lifetime. In fact, I admire it because it's the same route I took. Back when you were a girl, you were a Goldwater girl. And then, which was a libertarian guy with a very attractive, he was a very attractive candidate, I remember, very libertarian. And everybody when you're young wants to be libertarian. You don't want Social Security, you don't need anything else. You just want to be left alone. And that was Goldwater. And then, of course, you made the move like so many of us did to Eugene McCarthy, who was our hero, starting in the fall of '67. Explain that route, because I think most people are like that. They learn.
Well, I think we are supposed to learn. I think that's part of what experience should be teaching you. And, I grew up in a family where my father was a rock-ribbed conservative Republican, very much in the line of being self-sufficient and responsible, although he believed in community. So good public schools, good park district, things that he supported. My mother was much more democratically oriented. We used to laugh that they canceled each other's vote out every election. And I grew up really talking about politics, particularly with my dad. And when I went off to college, I went believing I was a Republican, and actually I was the president of the Young Republicans for a couple of months. And then I decided that I was much more in the camp of people like, President Lyndon Johnson trying to promote civil rights, voting rights, ending poverty, things that I began to understand were really important to have a basic safety net and a basic, understanding of what our rights were.
I didn't get into that one. I remember my dad saying we need Social Security because Goldwater said we do. And I said, my dad would say, what about the people that are unemployed? What about people that have been lucky in life?
Right.
You don't want the government to have to support them, so it's better to have Social Security to pay into.
Absolutely.
So, but you had that understanding about the needs of people, even though you're a suburbanite.
Well, but I give a lot of credit to my mother and my church because, I was raised a Methodist, and we had a great youth minister who would say to us all the time, you kids are lucky. You have a lot of blessings. You need to open your eyes to the rest of the world. He took us to see and hear Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. preach in Chicago. He set up exchanges, so we went into the inner city and visited with kids, black kids in churches, Hispanic kids in churches. I babysat for the children of migrant farm workers when I was just like 11 or 12 years old. So I was lucky because my mother and my church kept pushing open my understanding of the fact that not everybody looked like me, not everybody was raised like me, not everybody had the opportunities that I had, and I'm really grateful for that. So by the time I got to college, I said, I want to work out my own.
She became a real liberal.
I like to say progressive.
Word if they like the word. What was wrong with liberal?
Nothing's wrong with it.
It covers such a borderfront. It gets all the way over to democratic socialism, all the way over to modern.
It doesn't go as far as socialism. I'm sorry. It doesn't.
For you, it doesn't.
No.
You're not comfortable with that.
No, I'm not. Look, what I learned starting, in my late teens and in my 20s, is that in a complex, diverse society like ours, you were going to have safety nets. You were going to have to create opportunities for people. You were going to have to try to end the legacies of oppression, of slavery, of all of the kinds of wrongs that we had visited upon people from the very beginning. That this chamber where Abraham Lincoln spoke, he literally gave his life for.
So you know how tough it is for those people who don't have health care yet.
Absolutely.
The unemployed. People like that who don't qualify for Medicaid because they're not broke yet.
That's right.
There's a lot of people lost to the cracks there.
We have like 90% of coverage now, but that's 30 million people left out that we have.
Pretty horrible.
It is horrible. And I know a lot of the stories of these people because I've been working on this. Before there was something called Obamacare, it was called Hillary Care. I've been trying to get health care for people for a very long time.
Thank you. my town hall continues.
He keeps interjecting to say, "You're a liberal. You understand the people. You understand that." Is he filming an ad right now? Look, he went really hard on the Iraq stuff. But other than that, it's like he's trying to sell her to the audience.
And not only that,
whereas Chuck Todd was questioning every little thing that Bernie said.
Also, understand that some Democratic voters have been against Hillary because they question whether or not she's a progressive. And in that segment, Chris Matthews tried to make it seem as though being a progressive is this big, dangerous, scary thing, and that she shouldn't even want that to begin with. Basically trying to reframe the argument from a perspective of progressives are bad anyway, it's better to be a liberal. I mean, his bias is so clear and it's so transparent. And again, I want to reiterate, it's crazy that MSNBC would allow him to be the one to moderate this town hall. If they had someone else, even if it was Rachel Maddow, right, I'd be fine with that. And I think Rachel Maddow did a good job moderating. I think it was the first town hall of this.
It was a forum.
Oh, it was a forum. Yeah, she did a good job. I don't know why they chose Chris Matthews. I think that was a really bad idea on MSNBC's part.
I thought they were going to get Melissa Harris Perry. The point is, Goldwater, I love how Chris, talk about framing. Goldwater was a very attractive candidate. He was a very attractive candidate. Goldwater, very attractive candidate.
Didn't have any issues, did he?
Didn't have any issues whatsoever. And I love how he also said that I think most people start out the way you did. Most people start out as Republicans. That's what he said. Most people start out that way. Most people start out fighting for the wrong issues, for the wrong candidates, on the wrong side of history.
No, but
that's how fucking most people start out, Chris. No, that's not how most people start out.
Jimmy, that's the stereotype that they say that as you age, you start off supporting Republican presidents, and then once you hit 65, you become a progressive and get stuff done. That's generally what happens for most people.
Like, there's that part, like, I guess, you used to watch Jerry Springer and you go, oh, those people they didn't get normal shame. And the same thing with Chris Matthews and people who say, like, that question right there, it's like,
Look, here's the thing.
No, don't stop. Finish the thought. How are you not embarrassed? Like, you're not embarrassed to say something like that? Most people start out fucking wrong. No, obviously they don't. Obviously most people don't start out that way. What are you fucking talking about? Most people start out liberal and go the other way, just what Johnny said. He just said the exact backwards and opposite thing that we all know to be a truism.
Yeah. So he's doing, I think, an objectively bad job of moderating a town hall, which is a specific job. He took 35 minutes to get to the first question.
Yeah.
At the end, I want them to count up how many questions each was asked by the audience. She's going to have maybe they'll fit in a third question, maybe. And both of them were cutting in with statements as opposed to questions. But Chuck Todd was just throwing in little insults and little barbs at Bernie Sanders. He's just like, you're forgetting to say that you're compassionate and empathic, so I'll say it for you. That's not what you're supposed to do. I don't even care so much about the bias, but you're supposed to ask some questions. He's just getting her to say more about how awesome she is on the limited number of questions.
It's not helping her.
You're wrong.
Don't think it's
You're
helping.
wrong. It is absolutely helping her. Okay, when she has the ability to stand up there and say that her college debt plan is more comprehensive than Bernie Sanders, and she doesn't get challenged because Chris fucking Matthews has not even read her fucking policy compared to Bernie's policy, yeah, it's fucking helping her, okay? Because Bernie Sanders, he gets challenged, and he has to get defensive about his own policy ideas. Chris Matthews doesn't challenge her, she gets to say whatever the fuck she wants.
But he's actually explaining his policies, where she's just like, when she was talking, I was like, my brain lost, and I'm like,
I know.
I understand your point.
Guys, we have a question.
The issues that's been involved with the black community and police, what would you do to encourage dialogue between the African American community and the police to improve their relationships?
Well, I think that's the beginning that we have to do, is to recreate a dialogue and to have people in law enforcement, both currently serving and retired with a lot of experience, really going into communities and listening. We've got to rebuild respect between the police and the people they are sworn to protect. And there are a lot of excellent police officers and departments who could lead this dialogue. And where we need retraining, where we need to have body cameras, which I think would help protect police as much as protect people on the street. We need to be moving to try to rebuild that confidence and trust. So I'm going to look for ways, if I'm so fortunate enough to be president, to build on the recommendations from President Obama's policing commission and try to implement those and go further. But I want it to be led by people in law enforcement who I deeply respect, but we've got to have accountability so that the public respects the police as well.
Yes, by the way, go further. I like the
Madam Secretary, my son attends school here at District 186 in Springfield, and frequently when he's running across the playground to line up at school, I can't help but think about the children killed at Sandy Hook. I can't help but think about Tyshawn Lee assassinated on the south side of Chicago, and all the children who aren't at school today and won't be at school tomorrow. And I want to know, when you're president, what you're going to do to reduce gun violence and what we can do to help you.
You know, this is an issue that I am so profoundly disturbed about because I have met too many families who have lost loved ones, particularly children. You mentioned Sandy Hook and the parents there. I mean, for any parent, the image of, adjusting the backpack on your little 6-7-year-old daughter or son and sending the child off to school and then only to be called some hours later to say that that child that you are so deeply committed to and love so much has been murdered is just more than I can imagine. Today in Chicago, I visited a wall of bricks with the names of young people who have been murdered in Chicago in the last several years. I've gotten to know the mothers of a number of those children. And we have to take on the gun lobby. And I know it's not easy. I'm well aware of that. But when you have, on average, 90 people a day dying from gun violence, 33,000 a year, we need comprehensive background checks. We need to end the immunity from liability. The Sandy Hook parents are suing the maker of the AR-15, trying to do something, that channels their grief into action to prevent other children and people from being murdered. And I know that 92% of Americans agree with me, and 85% of gun owners do. But we've got to make this a voting issue. The gun lobby really intimidates elected officials, and they just basically vote the way they're told. My opponent talks about powerful lobbies in Washington, and there are a number of them. Nothing is more powerful than the gun lobby. And until we're ready to take them on and hold them accountable, we will not be in a position to try to begin to reduce the deaths from the epidemic of gun violence. So I'm going to need the help of every single American.
Thank you, Senator Clinton. Thank you for coming here, and thank you to the old state capitol here.
Okay, so interesting. This would have been a great opportunity for Hillary to talk about, what happened with the Nancy Reagan situation, how she gave Nancy Reagan credit for raising awareness about AIDS, but that question wasn't asked. There were some tough questions about Iraq, so I guess that's good. But overall, anyway, let's get to the summary before I lose my mind.
Can I just say that the first thing that comes on MSNBC immediately after the town hall is Trump. Yeah,
of course. Trump. Actually, you know what? I do want to take a super quick break because I want to confirm that we have the videos that we need, and then we'll come back with coverage. Stay right there. We'll be back in just a minute.
don't know who they are, but we're going to go to the break and sneak in a break here. And when we come back, we're going to talk to the. All right, I'm going to sneak in another break from those special interests that are supporting this town hall.
If they're paying you a salary, it's all right.
All right. We will be right back. It's the Bernie Sanders Town Hall in Columbus, Ohio. Senators, we're going to sneak in another break from those special interests that are supporting this town hall. The Bernie Sanders Town Hall from Columbus, Ohio. We'll return right after this. All right, we're going to sneak in one more break here. We're coming up to the end. The Bernie Sanders Town Hall here in Columbus, Ohio, on the campus of the Ohio State University.
All right, so
let's sneak in some commentary.
Yeah, it's not really sneaking it in. It was planned to begin with, but nonetheless, it was hilarious that he got a little offended by it. They don't like it when someone comes to their house and tells them the truth about how their programs are run. Yeah. They're run by corporate sponsors, just like our political system is run by corporate sponsors. It all happens every day, and they don't get called out on it, and I love that Bernie Sanders did call them out on it.
I'll give him a little bit of credit for the first time he said, we're going to go to our corporate sponsors. I mean, it's kind of a smarmy thing, like everything is there. But then he said it 3 times. So I'm curious, Jimmy, have you ever accidentally on stage started telling a joke you already told in that routine?
Yes.
Is that what he was doing?
Yes.
Like, did he think that he could sell it like it was a callback?
I don't think he thought about it until right before he had to throw to commercial break, and each time he wanted to preempt Bernie Sanders from humiliating him again. So, and he didn't think it through. It's like, fuck, I wish I'd thought about this again, and I could say something different. But it just, all those thoughts go through your head. Now, when I have repeated a joke, it's usually on the 3rd show, and I'm in Vegas on Saturday, and it's 1 in the morning. So you're like, did I tell this one tonight already? So that's usually when it happens. Like, yeah. The best point was when you're right. Chris Matthews, we were all happy that he went after Hillary about the Iraq War. He did not go after Hillary to expose Hillary. He went after Hillary to cover his own ass for cheerleading the Iraq War 10 or 15 years ago, however long it is right now. That's what that is, because he's been called out about doing that. On this show, on my show, on Mediaite has called him out. They've linked to the videos that I dug up about him. Chris Matthews has had the internet scrubbed. I don't know. I'm making that accusation already, but you can't find those videos. You can't find the videos anywhere of him. I remember watch him talk about the Iraq invasion and what he was pro for it, and what are they gonna say now about George Bush? Remember when he flew onto that aircraft here with his codpiece? He was sitting there going nuts over the Iraq War, and then
did he have a tingle up his leg?
Yeah, the whole deal, right? And so he called people against the Iraq War. John Murtha, he called him a carper and complainer. That's what he called John Murtha, decorated veteran who was against the Iraq War, called him a carper and complainer. So you can't find any of that. So when you see Chris Matthews going after Hillary Clinton on her Iraq War vote, that is him covering his own ass, because he knows the people in the know have exposed his ass about being pro-Iraq War. So I don't give him any credit for that whatsoever. And then he went right back to softballing. And in fact, he wrapped up that segment with what you said, you're ready to be commander-in-chief, and he giggled about it. What a bullshit laugh dog. Oh my God.
So there was a lot of giggling and laughing during Hillary's portion of the town hall.
Yes.
But also, in both portions of the town hall, there was a lot of talk about Trump and what is and isn't acceptable when it comes to political protest. Now, Hillary's answer stood out to me in particular, and I want to play it for you guys and kind of start a conversation about that. This is video number 5.
So I think what happened on Friday in Chicago is tragically a natural outgrowth of that kind of incitement. And, look, all of us in public life, and you've covered all kinds of people running for office, in office, we all get protested against. Somebody's always upset about something. The other day I had a man who's convinced that cell towers are causing, cancer in your salivary glands. Maybe someday we'll find out he's right. But at the moment, he's unfurling flags and he's yelling and screaming. We all have to deal with that, and you try to deal with it calmly and peacefully, and don't tell people, hey, do something to him, take him out, beat him up. And that's what leadership requires. You're supposed to be calming people down to try to find solutions to problems.
So she goes further and kind of talks about how important it is to do convenient protest. Like she didn't say convenient protest, but if you listen to her wording, it's about making protests convenient for the people that are being protested.
Yes.
But that's not the. I hate that. Like, so Occupy Wall Street, for instance, got a lot of criticism because it wasn't a convenient protest. They were riling people up.
Yes.
They were making people uncomfortable, right, in Zuccotti Park and throughout the country. And I loved it. And the reason why I loved it is because people were finally shooken out of their complacency and forced to focus on these issues that are tearing Americans apart, whether it's income inequality, wealth inequality, the inability to pay for health insurance, all of these things, the basic necessities we need to survive, were being talked about. The rhetoric changed in the country because those protests were not convenient. Okay, so I don't condone violence. I don't think that violence is the right way. But when you start talking to me about, like, okay, well, if you want to do it, you want to do a protest, you have to have the proper permits, and you got to make sure that you stay in your corner over there where none of us can see you. Get the fuck out of here with that bullshit. That's not a protest. I don't want violence. I don't want you to shut down anyone else's free speech. But look, when you have a candidate who is condoning violence, who uses violent rhetoric constantly, and then you turn around and you blame Bernie supporters for that, I'm going to get pissed off, okay? Because it's not Bernie's camp that's inciting violence, it's Trump's camp. And when we talk about how we need to follow the rules and make sure we don't rile people up, I get a little heated.
You know, exactly what you said, if I could just piggyback on your point. You know, saying that, sure, we need to protest, but it has to be respectful, and you can't disrupt it. If you're doing a protest that is sanctioned by the people you're protesting and the police, you're not in a protest, you're in a fucking parade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. That's perfect. All right, so let's move on to biggest winners, biggest losers, and all that. So this might be controversial, but I would argue that the biggest winner of this debate was Hillary Clinton. And the reason why I think that she's the biggest winner is because despite what I know about policy ideas and despite the candidate that I support, who's Bernie Sanders, I think that for the average American watching this, maybe an American who doesn't know about all these different policy ideas, they're going to look at both portions of this town hall and just assume that Hillary is better versed in being a leader. And the reason why I say that, and Wes disagrees with me, which is why I think this is controversial, the reason why I think that is because Bernie went first. Bernie was questioned by Chuck Todd, and the line of questioning was difficult. And for the majority of time, Bernie Sanders had to defend himself, right? And so, as a result, for someone who doesn't dig deeper into the policy ideas, they're going to just see Bernie as this defensive guy who might not be ready to be a leader. On the other hand, you have Chris Matthews, who's very supportive of Hillary Clinton, moderating her portion of the town hall and asking her very simple questions, if you ask me. And as a result, I think that people are going to look at that and they're going to think, okay, well, she seems like she knows what she's doing. She was asked a few tough questions about foreign policy. Maybe she's a better leader than Bernie. I think that's what the perception is going to be. You disagree with me.
You're completely wrong. Mm-hmm. Listen, I didn't support either candidate before he came in. I watched it. I'm like, fucking Bernie's the man.
But do you know?
And let me tell you why. Okay, watching it, he didn't flub a single question.
He flubbed the question about the Wall Street employees. A little bit.
He didn't at all. He didn't miss a single beat to explain his ideas. He didn't let himself get bullied around by the moderator in terms of trying to change the framing on it. And when I heard his answers, I heard authentic answers from someone who knew about the subjects they were talking about and gave really direct responses. When I heard Clinton's answers, first of all, she bombed those foreign policy questions hard. Like, you could look at her text afterwards, and someone who didn't watch it could say, oh, she did pretty good. But if you watched it, you thought she bombed. And not just that, Clinton's answer to every single question, what they all had in common was, it felt like someone said, I asked for a 5-page paper, and you need to give me 5 pages.
Yeah.
Because every answer was incredibly long, that halfway through it, and also not very specific. Okay. So through every answer, I'm thinking, oh man, what the fuck? What were you talking about? What's your position on that? And you can say, well, she smiled at the reporter, and he smiled back, so the audience is going to say she won. But in the presentation of the facts and how they handled it, it wasn't even close.
So I just, look, I want the audience to understand, and also you to understand, that in terms of what they said, yes, I agree that Bernie's the winner. I mean, he got into his policy ideas. It was very in-depth. He was asked the most challenging questions, and he handled them with grace. And I think that with intelligence and grace. And I think that, the Wall Street question, I only say that he flubbed it because there was this kid who asked him, like, hey, you know what? I want to work for Wall Street, and you seem to be against them. Well, like, what are you going to do? Am I going to not have that opportunity? He framed the answer in a way that made it seem like, well, if that kid wants to be a Wall Street guy, then he's not going to have the opportunity, which isn't true. But look,
you're right. Bernie should have said, listen, you're always going to have the opportunity to exploit the ignorant in life. Don't worry. Don't worry, kid. Get out there and take some money. I think he should have run him and punch that kid in the face.
Okay, but I don't want to get off on that tangent. What I want to do is respond to what you said. And look, you are a foreign policy nut, Wes. Okay, so you pay attention to those answers. You care about those answers. You want to know what those policy ideas are. I'm talking about the average American. Average American is going to watch that, I guarantee you, and they're going to see a defensive old man. Oh my God, this guy doesn't seem like he knows what he's doing. And then they're going to see Hillary sitting there, cool as a cucumber, because she's not being challenged.
I don't even think Bernie felt that defensive. I felt he confidently responded to the guy who obviously came off as a prick.
Okay, if you don't believe me, let me go to one of the questions. Bernie was asked, so, how are you and Donald Trump kind of the same? Like, what makes you guys different? Let's go to video number 2.
So if you're a Trump supporter, let's say you're a 50-year-old guy, and your job went to China, you know what? You're really angry because now you have a job that maybe pays you 50 or 60% of what you used to have. You can't afford to send your kid to college. You are angry. And meanwhile, you're seeing almost all new wealth and income going to the top 1%. That issue you guys should talk about a little bit more as well. All right? Fair enough. All right. You're angry. And then Trump comes along and says, you know what? You're angry. You should be angry. It's the fault of the Muslims. It's the fault of the Mexicans. Well, problem is that is racism, that is xenophobia, and it has nothing to do with the real causes of the problem. So what I say to the Trump supporters, I say, look, do you understand that Donald Trump thinks that the $7.25 an hour minimum wage is as high as should go? And they'll say, really? That's a starvation wage. I say, did you hear Trump on a national Republican debate where he said wages in America are too high? Really? Too high? That Trump believes that climate change is a hoax emanating from China? Really? No kidding. That's pretty crazy. That Trump wants to give hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks to billionaire families like himself? I didn't know that. In other words, it is not just that I think we will defeat Trump because the American people do not think we should be divided up. This guy has insulted Mexicans, Muslims, women. He's insulted veterans. John McCain, a war hero. The American people are not going to vote for somebody like that.
So, look, he handled that question perfectly, right? But the fact that he had to answer that question and show that he and Trump are different is ridiculous, because that puts this idea in the voters' mind that, hey, you know what? Maybe this guy is similar to Trump. That scares me. I don't want someone who's even remotely similar to Trump.
Or maybe Trump's not so crazy after all. Maybe he's just blustery, but he's got the same ideas as Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
So maybe I shouldn't be afraid of Trump.
I don't know. Maybe it was my perception, and maybe my perception's wrong. I'm just worried because he seemed like he had to defend himself while Hillary got to just enjoy a moderator that complimented her and giggled with her and gave her softball questions.
I mean, you're not even exaggerating for the first 15 minutes of it. He was giggling. He's smiling and he's just putting his hand. It was like, they're hanging out. And I bet they might get ice cream later. They might.
I bet tougher questions on first dates.
Yeah, I made a joke about it. I think that he'll get the second date. I think.
Look at us. And
we're gonna have to tune in next week to see if she'll give him a rose. I don't know. I'm a bit between you two, leaning more towards Wes, I think. I mean, because I think you're both right. I think that people watching the Hillary section are not going to question her as a candidate based on what they see tonight, except perhaps if they still feel strongly about Iraq, which hopefully a lot of people do, because I don't want people to forget the lessons that we took so many years and so many thousands of lives to learn. But I think the people watching Bernie, assuming that they're more interested in what Bernie says than what Chuck Todd says, and I hope to God that that's what's true, they will learn that he is looking out for people like them. And he kept coming back to that over and over and over. And I definitely don't like Chuck Todd more than Bernie. How many people walk around wearing a Chuck Todd
fucking T-shirt have you seen?
I have not yet.
How many Chuck Todd posters have sold over the internet?
So not a likable guy. We should make a Chuck Todd T-shirt design and see if we can sell one.
Do like
nothing against Chuck Todd.
do news hosts have T-shirts though? I've never seen a news host.
That would be interesting.
Well, people will think they're Johnny Pie shirts and they'll buy them. But the point is, no, it's funny to see Chris Matthews. I mean, they say to Chuck Todd say to Bernie, "Oh, you're a one-issue candidate, right?" Which is just repeating the other, just ridiculous, repeating bullshit talking points. Him not also revealing that he doesn't understand that the one issue is tied inextricably to every other issue. That's why all the other issues are happening, because we have money in politics.
Yeah.
Because our democracy has been hijacked by the plutocrats. Like, you don't understand this? You haven't read any books or anything lately about people talking about the economy? So it's funny that they would say to Bernie Sanders, "You're a one-issue candidate," but do you think Chris Matthews would ever say to Hillary Clinton, "You know, they say Bernie Sanders is a one-issue candidate, but you're a no-issue candidate. Like, what is your issue?"
Yeah,
he would never say, "What is your issue?" She doesn't have an issue, and it's obvious listening to her. There is no reason for her to want to be president. She just wants to be president because she wants to be president, because she thinks that she's got it coming, like Jeb Bush had it coming, and she thinks it's going to be cool because she'll be the first woman. And that's me reading into what her motivation is, because there doesn't seem to be
when we learn no lessons. You see polls about Iran and about Syria and about sending ground troops in, and people are like, yeah, what the fuck, let's do it.
Yeah, supporting our troops, nothing like sending our troops to Middle Eastern wars that we don't need to be in. All right, so we did biggest winner. Let's move on to biggest loser. Although I believe Hillary Clinton unfortunately ended up being the biggest winner of this debate, I would argue that Bernie Sanders wasn't necessarily the biggest loser. The biggest loser was definitely MSNBC. And if you don't believe me, I have a few video clips to show you just how biased this town hall coverage really was. So I'm going to start off with video number 1. This is a video where Chuck Todd was talking to Bernie Sanders specifically about Donald Trump and some of his rhetoric and some of the accusations that Donald Trump has launched toward Bernie Sanders because of his rally being shut down in Chicago. Take a look at how he handled this. This is video number 1.
But with Trump, what you are dealing with, and I say this without any joy, this guy's a pathological liar.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is...
That's almost a clinical...
well, it is. Yeah. I mean, Politico had a piece today in the paper. They say it's very hard to fact-check him because he never has any facts. He just, Bernie Sanders is a communist. That's total, absolute, complete lie. And he goes on from there. So it is very difficult dealing with some guy who lies all the time. And what I think Senator Rubio and many of us feel is this is a guy who's inciting violence. But let's get beyond Mr. Trump and let's deal with the issues facing
exactly.
All right, let's take a look at more of Chuck Todd's questions from this town hall.
But with Trump, what you are dealing with, and I say this without any joy, this guy's a pathological liar.
What do you mean by that?
What I mean by that is...
That's almost a clinical...
well, it is. Yeah. I mean, Politico had a piece today in the paper. They say it's very hard to fact-check him because he never has any facts. He just...
And here's what's got to be uncomfortable, because on a couple of issues, and they're not small issues, particularly here in Ohio, you and Donald Trump share the same position, for instance, on trade. And I've gone to your rallies, and I've gone to his rallies. And when you ask him, well, if not Trump or if not Sanders, I'm not saying a majority of your supporters are a majority of his, but you hear Trump supporters say, hey, I like what I hear from Bernie Sanders. Or you hear Sanders supporters saying, I like what I hear from Trump. Well, it's interesting. If she's the nominee against Donald Trump, he is closer to you on trade than she is. Well, you talked about your campaign as revolution. The turnout excitement is happening on the Republican side. Hasn't happened on the Democrat. We haven't seen the high turnout numbers that you have wanted. I guess I go back to, you have never supported a trade agreement. That we've had yet. I think, but there hasn't been one that you've been able to sign on to.
That's right. And you know what? I was right.
Is there anyone that can ever be drawn up?
Of course there is. Of course there is.
Then why hasn't it happened?
Why hasn't it happened? Because that's the broader issue.
Why hasn't Barack Obama been able to do it?
Well, Barack Obama and I love the president. He and I have worked together on many, many issues. He's wrong on the Trans-Pacific Partnership.
Was he wrong on the Korea deal? Was he wrong on
Yes, he was, as a matter of fact.
You realize Secretary Clinton hits you for being a one-issue candidate because you take any issue and you do bring it back.
Well, let me tell you
to essentially Wall Street.
If you heard, as I'm sure you have.
Campaign. What do you tell him?
What I tell you, if you go to my speeches, there are an hour and 15 minutes. And maybe the one issue is my concern about the disappearance of the American middle class and the grotesque level of income and wealth inequality. Where, Chuck,
but you do believe that singularly it is special interests that are at the root.
Do I believe that in this great country, our United States Congress is dominated by Wall Street and big money interests who have huge influence over the political process? Of course I do. I don't think that that is in doubt. You got to not know anything about what goes on not to understand that.
So a lot of tough questions aimed at Bernie, which I wouldn't have a problem with if you had the same treatment toward Hillary. But again, watch the first 15 minutes of Hillary's portion of the town hall, and she's asked questions like, don't you think Trump is, really a bad guy? Like, I'm paraphrasing, obviously, but that's what the tone of the questioning was. It was very simple, hardballs. And, Hillary Clinton can sit back and talk about how loving she is and how much she likes to look out for the people, and it goes unchallenged. Very vague, broad, general statements. And it helps her. So I think that MSNBC failed in this. And the number one fail, honestly, was Chris Matthews, a Hillary supporter, moderating her portion of the town hall. Unacceptable.
Yeah.
I agree with you more. It just seems weird to me that Chuck Todd, I understand Chris Matthews in the tank for Hillary Clinton, and the only time he's going to seem tough on her is when he's want to cover his own ass about the Iraq War. But Chuck Todd, it's just like, what's going on in our politics here in America? You don't understand that what's wrong with it. You don't understand what's broken. You don't understand who influences our politics. You don't understand what the underlying problem is in our economy and our politics right now. You don't understand what Bernie Sanders has been talking about for the last 10 months. It's like it's all news to you, and it's like a Rubik's Cube. It's like you're thinking somebody controls our government. What? You think big donors are the problem? You think money, but Barack Obama takes money. How could there possibly be a problem? It's like this is all blowing Chuck Todd's mind, that this problem that has been clearly delineated by many, many, many people, all right, including most recently Ashton Edelman, who was the get-go on Wall Street. He was the guy they based that movie on, and he's the one who also said that. Chuck Todd, what? I don't know. What are you talking about? I don't know what's going on. Bernie, this is all Greek to me. What are you saying? Money in politics is a problem? That there's people who own our politics? I just don't get it. All of them? Even Barack Obama? Really? Because I haven't heard this. I'm just Chuck Todd, the host of Meet the Press.
Yeah. All right. Anything else on this topic?
No.
All right.
You're right. MSNBC was the loser.
All right. And then I want to get to the biggest fail. And I've been wanting to get into this for such a long time, and I finally have the opportunity.
Oh, I know what it is.
Okay. So during Hillary Clinton's portion of the town hall, she was asked about student loan debt. And as always, Hillary gets to talk about how her plan is better than Bernie's. And I would argue that this is the biggest fail of every debate, every town hall where Hillary gets to spout this talking point, because it's simply not true. Now let's take a look at the video, and I'll explain to you why it's not true. This is video number 8.
First question.
Hi, my name is Summer Ghazni. Right now, a lot of college students are backing Bernie Sanders. So I want to know, what specifically are you going to do for college students who are graduating with a large amount of debt?
Well, I'm really glad you asked that, Summer, because I have a plan I call the New College Compact, which not only will make college more affordable with debt-free tuition for students, but will also refinance the student debt that young people already have. I want to refinance it, saving thousands of dollars for people who have graduated but are weighted down by this debt. I want to move people into what are called income contingency repayment programs, so that you pay back as a percentage of your income. And I want to put a time certain to end your payments. So I think actually my approach is more comprehensive and will do more for people. It's affordable, it meets the needs that folks have, and I think it will lift the debt off of millions of Americans.
So she keeps saying that her plan is more comprehensive. Some people say that it's more progressive. All you need to do is dig deeper and figure out exactly what Bernie would do and what Hillary would do. So the big criticism of Bernie Sanders is, all he wants to do is try to make public colleges and universities free. And then what happens to books? What happens to housing? What happens to all those other things that students have to pay for that oftentimes can be very costly? Well, Bernie actually addresses that on his own website. And what he would do is he would use federal grants, like Pell Grants, for instance, for the neediest students so they can pay for those things. Now, tuition would be taken care of if they decided to go to a state school because, again, tuition would be free under Bernie Sanders' higher ed plan. Now, with Hillary's plan, there are so many holes that you can, look into. For instance, tuition will not be free. But if you are an underprivileged student and you can't pay for it, well, that's when the government would come in and help you out, right? So you wouldn't have to take out loans. But here's the thing. There are students out there who have parents, right, that might work as, let's say, a handyman or something like that. Maybe one year they make really, really good money, and then the next year business dries up and you're having a hard time making money, right? What would happen under her system is very similar to what students are going through right now with FAFSA. You fill out this form, you show what your parents' income is, and then they decide whether or not they're going to give you help based on your parents' income, okay? First of all, it's assuming that parents are going to help pay for college. Second of all, it's assuming that parents make the same amount of money year after year. That's not true, right? A lot of times, money fluctuates, income fluctuates for families. Another issue is this whole thing about, after 20 years, the federal government will just allow you to get rid of your student loan debt and you never have to worry about it again. That is a lie, okay? Here's what happens. And we have this system in place now. She's acting like she's doing something revolutionary. After those 20 years are up, right, what's likely to happen is the interest rate on those loans is going to be high, right? She says you can refinance it. I don't know whether or not she's going to fight to lower the interest rate. She says she is. But if you only pay 10% of what your income is, that amount that you owe is going to keep increasing, right? So by the time you want to get rid of that debt, it's 20 years, you're like, I'm done with it. The IRS considers that taxable income. They send you a 1099 form, you go to your tax guy, and boom, all of a sudden you have to pay this massive tax bill. So many students have already been dealing with that now. She's not doing anything revolutionary. Bernie Sanders would provide free tuition at public universities and colleges. He would make sure that if you don't have money to pay for housing and books and things like that, you can apply for federal grants. Okay, his program is much more progressive than hers is, and the reason why this is the biggest fail of the debate is because she keeps saying this over and over again, and the moderators are too freaking ignorant to look into their policy ideas and hold her accountable. Yes.
Anna, I was gonna take it further.
Okay.
You sound like Hillary. Yeah, but whoa, you actually want me to take it? No. The thing is, there were no follow-up questions.
None.
When she said anything.
Yeah.
Comprehensive. Like if Chuck Todd had been doing Hillary Clinton, so how are you going to take it further? Yeah. Can you tell me what makes it more comprehensive? There was just
there were no follow-ups.
But at the same time, I don't think he did her any favors. I think people watching it know she was full of shit on most of her answers. I don't think she won a lot of supporters. She might have cemented the ones who already wanted to vote for her.
I also think, I think that in some ways her plan would be an improvement of what we have right now. I don't like it as much as Bernie's, although I've been doing more reading and I found a couple of cases that could be made that, not that his plan is worse, but that he would have a big fight on his hands to put his plan into play, not through Congress, but state by state, getting the states to contribute the money that they have to.
And that's a fair criticism. That is absolutely a fair criticism.
Thank you. I try to be.
Yeah.
But also, while we always criticize the fact that he says, so I'm going to do this, it's going to cost something like $60 to $70 billion a year, and so there's all these questions about how you're going to pay for it, and not for paying for war and things like that. So her plan doesn't cost as much, but it still costs a significant amount of money. Let's say half as much. She doesn't get half of the questions for how she'll pay for it. She doesn't get any questions about how she'll pay for it.
That's right.
And this isn't apples to oranges. This is apples to slightly more frugal apples.
Yeah.
But they don't care. If it costs $40 billion a year, it's not even worth bringing up.
And understand that this is not just like a little fringe issue that's a passion project for me, right? When you have $1.3 trillion in student loan debt, when your friends that you know your entire life can't find jobs, and once they do, they can't even pay for a car or a house because they owe so much in student loan debt, that's not only impacting their personal lives, that's impacting all of us and our economy, right? So let's stop pretending like, oh, student loan debt, this is just a fun topic to talk about because it's a fringe issue. No, it's an issue that's impacting every single one of us. And when it comes to federal student loans, that's our taxpayer money that students are having a hard time paying back because they're getting screwed by these institutions, including for-profit colleges, which, by the way, I found out Bill Clinton got paid by to the tune of $16 million in 4 years.
That's an enormous amount.
That's a lot of money, but that sounds like that would influence him, but he made well over $100 million giving speeches. He might not have even noticed the $16 million.
Well, isn't it weird that Hillary Clinton loves to say that money doesn't influence me, and Barack Obama took money from Wall Street, and he still regulated them. And then she does, on the other side of her mouth, she talks about the most powerful lobbies in Washington. So which is it? Are the lobbyists powerful in Washington, or can you withstand them without even trying? So it's like, again, she's doing speaking out of both sides of her mouth, which is exactly the criticism of her from the first time she ran for president. They would say, if you remember, which I remember, that they would stand on stage and say to her, now, Secretary Clinton, or they would call her Senator Clinton, just said two things in a span of 3 minutes. I don't know which one she means. And everyone would laugh, and then she would do it again. It was just like the Marco Rubio thing with Chris Christie. Look, he can't help himself. And she would do it again. And people forget this. It's amazing what short memories people have. All you have to do is go on YouTube and look up the Democratic debates from 2007 and 2008, and that's all they were talking about, was that Hillary's not trustworthy. She says anything to get elected. In fact, Barack Obama's commercial said so. In one of his commercials, he ran and says Hillary will say anything to get elected and change nothing.
You know who looks up those videos? Millennials, who are undervalued and underestimated in elections, okay? They're people that grew up in the digital world. They know what's going on. They're watching those YouTube videos that you're talking about right now. They're watching this show right now. And for them, I say thank you, because while you're undervalued by society, the reality is you are the smartest one of the smartest generations in this country. And please, please, please do not ever be complacent. Fight back against the system, because we need to. All right, that does it for our debate coverage. Sure. That wasn't a debate. Our town hall coverage.
It was barely a town hall. I thought it was the first half of it was definitely a debate between Chuck Todd.
Yeah,
sure. And I thought Bernie kicked his ass.
Don't freak out.
Don't freak out.
Don't freak out.
All right, guys. Stay tuned, because we do have our main show ahead for you guys. It's a condensed hour-long version of it, but it's going to be a lot of fun with the same panelists. So come right back. We'll see you soon.
welcome to the Young Turks, our after town hall coverage. Now, it's getting a little bit late, but we like talking, so we're going to do that. We've got a number of topics for the first hour and the second hour, and we're going to jump right into it with some coverage on the Trump violence. Both Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton have, in no uncertain terms, condemned Donald Trump for inciting mob violence at his recent rallies, even hyping up more and more incitement with every passing rally. Now, on the Republican side, though, it's much more of a mixed bag. You have certain Republican candidates who are implying that he's going too far, how merciful of them. You have a John Kasich saying that Trump was getting close to disqualifying himself from the nomination. He then said, "Let's see what happens." Strong words from John Kasich. He's getting close. If you become a fascist, you're close to going too far. And then you have Marco Rubio saying about whether he would continue in his pledge to, if Trump becomes the nominee, actually supporting him. He says, "I don't know, I already talked about the fact that I think Hillary Clinton would be terrible for this country, but the fact that you're even asking me that question, I still at this moment intend to support the Republican nominee, but it's getting harder every day." And thankfully, he did say we settle our differences in this country at the ballot box, not with guns or bayonets or violence. Thankfully, no bayonets yet at a Trump rally. So that's Kasich and Rubio still running against him. Ted Cruz said, well, unless he shoots somebody, I'm still going to support him. So he cares more about keeping his pledge than actually responding to the terrible precedent that Trump is setting, the terrible incitement that he's doing. And then you have Ben Carson, who's out of the race now, and he is one of the most high-profile backers right now of Donald Trump. And listen to the way he spins, in a crazy Orwellian way, what's going on between Trump supporters and protesters in this clip.
Do you believe that Donald Trump bears any responsibility for what has happened at some of these rallies?
Well, again, I think we have a tendency to focus on the wrong thing there. The problem is that there are those who are being taught that if someone disagrees with you, you have the right to interfere with their First Amendment rights, their ability to express themselves, their freedom of speech. That's where the emphasis needs to be. Now, when people do things wrong, such as that, it causes other people to react in a way that is negative.
Yeah, so they can't help but punch people.
No, let me ask you something, Carson. So, if someone goes to a Trump rally and does a silent protest, which does not violate anyone's First Amendment rights, it's just a political demonstration that is supposed to be applauded by this country, right? That's supposed to celebrate political activism. Why is it that Trump and his goons will throw that person out in the most violent way necessary, right? How come that First Amendment right isn't applauded and supported?
Well, he doesn't even recognize that that is an exercise of the First Amendment. Look, everybody deserves to go to political gatherings, whether they're protesting or simply hearing, but it seems to me that a person sitting in a hall listening to a speech is exercising free speech a little bit less than somebody who's protesting. I personally think that they should both be able to do what they do, but he's not even including the protesters in that.
Yeah.
And he also assumes that humans are such vile-based creatures that if you interfere with them, well, of course they have to ravage you. And look, it's sort of implying that the protesters are more at fault is bad enough. But then he goes on to say that he actually thinks there could and perhaps should be even more violence in the future in this clip.
You worry where this might lead if Donald Trump becomes the nominee of the Republican Party. Do you see a general election season with escalating violence and words being used that are inflammatory?
There is a real possibility of escalation because those who are the victims of them have two choices. They can submit to them and meekly just do whatever those protesters want them to do, or they can fight back. And if they decide to fight back, there could be an escalation.
You gotta love, they gotta meekly just go and do whatever the protesters want. What happens is the protesters are getting escorted out, and meekly go along, or you do the natural thing. You run up to someone being protested out and punch them in the face. It's not like they're being beset by the protesters.
John, you know what I'd do if someone, get out of here. Get out of here.
Sleep on you.
I mean, who cares what they... If Tyson...
Are you not worried about the Alinskyites
No, look, if anything, this guy's proven that the whole brain surgeon means smart is totally misplaced.
Now all we've got is rocket scientists. That's to fall back.
I'd say rocket scientist is smarter anyway, because look, a brain surgeon is a mechanic who doesn't get queasy around blood. Okay, they're not a fucking
mechanic of very small things.
Yes, they're a mechanic who doesn't get upset around blood. That's it.
I think brain surgeons are insanely intelligent. They can grasp
after watching that.
Really?
Yeah,
after watching, like what concept?
No,
like
no.
This
Okay,
thing
hold on,
here,
hold on.
cut it.
I know, but there are people.
Like what part of that is?
I'm sure
there are all sorts of different types of people who have brains that work in different ways, right? There are some people who are insanely intelligent in some areas, but insanely stupid in other areas. Like Jake likes to bring up how he's really smart when it comes to politics, but not so smart when it comes to physics. He's also not so smart when it comes to doing anything involving like life maintenance, like getting his oil changed or things like that. Like people work in different ways, right?
True.
Which is why I think it's better to be someone who just is interested and intelligent for a lot of different like factors and things and whatever. Anyway,
I would love to have heard him ask Matt. What's his name? Matt Lauer. Lauer would have asked Mr. Sleepy Doctor if instead it's the way you frame the question. You know, the way he says, "Are you worried about what's going to maybe happen in the future?" Not like. Hey, doesn't it gross you out to see your party's nominee inciting violence? Like that would be the question. Doesn't it gross you out, or don't you want to condemn Donald Trump, who's purposely inciting violence? You don't ask like it's a question. Is he inciting violence? What's exact? Again, I'm just a news person with the NBC News, the biggest, most richest, powerful news organization in the world at my fingertips that I could use. I'm sure I have an assistant. I'm Matt. I make $25 million a year. They helicopter me into the studio 3 times a fucking week. The other 2 days I have to drive. It's horrible. But so he doesn't. So that it's the way you're asking the question. You don't go. I don't know. Maybe I'm not sure what's happening. Ben Carson, aren't you afraid that something might happen? Stuff has already happened. People are already beating up people outside of these events and saying they're doing it because of Donald Trump. If they're beating up homeless people, they're beating up Mexicans, they're attacking Muslims. This is happening in our country right now all the time. Little kids are coming home who are Muslim from school saying that they're being bullied because they're Muslims. And this is happening. And then we have people endorsing guys like Donald Trump. We have mainstream people endorsing him. And that this guy's supposed to be a Christian. Donald Trump called you a molester. And now you are endorsing him.
About that.
So again, and that's Matt, what's his name? Matt Lauer doesn't say that to him, right? He doesn't frame it again.
They're afraid to say what's obviously true.
It's like as if we brought in journalists from another country who doesn't know what's happening in America to interview people about what's happening in America. Matt Lauer has no idea what's happening at Trump events or what strong-arm politics looks like or what a fascist does in other countries because it's happening right here, right now. And he's still like, what is this? I'm not sure. Dr. Ben Carson, you're not afraid a little? Believe me, Donald Trump could not be doing what he's doing. This situation would not be happening without the complicit help of the mainstream media, who we heard Les Moonves cheering on Donald Trump because it makes them all richer than they are. How much more money does Matt Lauer need? He makes $25 million a year. He gets helicoptered in 3 times a fucking week to that job. Anyway, it's just amazing to me. And by the way, you still don't know what's going on in America.
Well, if that makes you mad, wait until you get a load of this. So, this whole time we've been waiting as Trump marches step by step towards American fascism for him to get his brown shirts. And today he got just a little bit closer. It's been shut down, but very briefly, and it will be back. There was an online group called the Lions Guard who are going to be his goons, his uniformed troops in the field to protect his supporters. They said this on Facebook, do you want to provide security protection to innocent people who are subject to harassment and assault by far-left agitators? If so, you are welcome to join. He said that Lions Guard said that their members would be unarmed, but willing to forcefully protect people if need be. And we also have we have a shot of their Facebook group while it lasted. So, yes, the Lions Guard. The lion is Trump, sort of, with red hair as a mane instead of an orange wig. They were on Twitter as well. and I saw some of the people that were retweeting them and spreading it, and it was groups who are worried about an ethnocentric cleansing of America are enthusiastically spreading this group. Now, it was shut down after just about, I think, 5 hours, in which it had already gathered 500 volunteers, because apparently someone threatened the child of the leader, which of course we don't condone, although it's a violent threat, so there's a possibility it could be a Trump supporter. But anyway, they existed very briefly. They say that they are going to come back, and during the limited time that they were on Facebook, one of the things that they started to debate on that Facebook group is what uniforms they should get, because that's the first thing. You want to have a cool outfit. Yep. And so I wanted to bring up this tweet that summarizes very well 2 of the different looks they could go with. Depends on how retro you want to go. The arch rival, nice job there. I like how scary the second lion is. That's the not so cowardly lion. But yeah, I mean, look, they buy into the idea that they're not the violent ones, that the other side is the violent ones. And we hear this from the right all the time, that they're worried about thugs on the left, as if you look back at the political assassinations, that it's the libs who are going around gunning down people constantly. And they have bought into the idea that it is the agitators. They've been told from their lord, their leader, that it's not them, that they're simply, it's a beautiful, passionate thing when they attack people.
But they believe there's agitators. They were like an Alinsky-eyed agitator. They believe there's a secret organization sending these people forward, rather than simply people who are a little bit armed with the facts and upset about the lies the guy's doing.
Yeah,
it's a Bernie person.
I think this is fine. I think that militias that use violent force against those who have any opposing opinions is a good thing. It's good in America. It's good in the Middle East. We should all support militias. Militias are awesome.
Yeah. By the way, there's reports of not.
Do they even know what they're doing? Like, think about that first.
No, there's reports, and completely ignoring the reports that from Breitbart, which is a right-wing rag, right, known for its. Their reporter was assaulted by the campaign Lewandowski, the campaign manager for Trump, and was assaulted. There's corroborating evidence this happened. 2, if not 3, of the reporters for Breitbart have now quit Breitbart because the website is now siding with Trump because they want to be in with the power guy. They don't want to be on the outside; they want to be on the inside. Yeah. And Breitbart's they've really been committed to the facts, so they could give a fuck, right? And isn't it amazing to see how when their lack of integrity comes back to bite themselves? That's fun. Like, you were working for Breitbart. Are you guys surprised that they don't stand by you to do the right thing? That they're going to go with the strong man who's in power now? That's what they've always done. Yeah. Now it comes back to bite you in the ass. It's good to see.
Yeah, no,
I love it.
You're right to be frustrated. We all are. And it's scary. I mean, look, people throw around constantly since I've been paying attention to politics, which is not that long, 15 years, everyone throws around that your side is Hitler, your side is the Nazis. I think libs do it because they're worried about authoritarianism and fascism. Right-wingers do it because they've been fooled into thinking that Hitler was a lib, that because he was a vegetarian and possibly gay. Everybody does it. And everybody hates the idea that that's the movement they'd be a part of. And yet when you have Trump up there, he's a Bernie guy, get him out the Bernie guy, as if he's been studying tapes of Mussolini and then he's organizing these groups, he's telling them to attack people. We can make America great again because we're weak now, because we're not hard enough on protesters. We love the Constitution and attacking political protesters. And then when you go there and you're enthusiastically about that candidate, doesn't that scare you? Don't you see history repeating itself? That you can't understand that even if some of the specifics are different, that the appeal is the same. That xenophobia and faux populism to get people worked up to attack outsiders is the same as in those countries in Europe back at the first half of the last century.
It's happened throughout human history. It's a really easy thing to do. But when you were talking, I was thinking, what if Chuck Todd was interviewing Mahatma Gandhi and Adolf Hitler? And he's like, listen, a lot of people out there are confused. I mean, you're both vegetarians, so tell me how you're different. You both have followers. You both have followers. You both believe in not killing animals.
Yeah. It's scary times. But we do have what could be a little bit of good news that I'm very, very interested to get Wes's perspective on. I hate this all word. Anyway, Russia is going to begin drawing down their military forces in Syria, according to news outlets from Russia. And I am interested to find out if it's actually mission accomplished for them or if it's just mission accomplished. And so we're going to turn to Wes in just a second, but I do want to read you a statement from Vladimir Putin. He says that I think the task that was assigned to the Ministry of Defense and the armed forces as a whole has achieved its goal. So I order the defense minister to start tomorrow withdrawing the main part of our military factions from the Syrian Arab Republic. That we don't know, he says he's starting tomorrow. We don't know what pace it'll be on, what percentage will be left behind. Although we do know that Russia's Hamaiman Air Base and its Mediterranean port at Tartus would continue to operate as normal. And so, of course, they have had troops in Syria at that particular base for quite a while, but they're supposedly going to be moving out some of the troops and, of course, the air forces that they brought in to conduct their raids against the anti-Assad rebels.
What's the reasoning behind this?
Mission accomplished. That's the stated reasoning at the very least. Do you think that it is mission accomplished? I mean, they sent in a number of bombers and attack aircraft to go against groups that had already largely been, in my perception, destroyed. And so I wonder to what extent
Didn't they really hit ISIS harder than anybody, though?
I mean, that's what they were saying.
They hit everybody really hard. Mission accomplished. He saved Assad's regime for now. He scared away the Turks and the Saudis from getting more deeply involved, so he accomplished that.
That's true.
He showed the world, look at all this high-tech equipment I have that I'm not afraid to use. Russia's back,
basically.
Russia's back, check it out, and attention, anybody who wants to suppress a revolution or a civil war, who's your buddy?
Yeah.
Me.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Mission accomplished, let's get out of here.
I mean, mission accomplished for now, but, I mean, how long is this mission going to be accomplished, right? Like, the rebels still exist.
Yeah. In a weakened state, a fairly weak state. I mean, look, I think that you're right in that it is a demonstration of their supposed continued military prowess. It allows, the more Russia intervenes in countries like it did in Crimea, Ukraine, although they don't say that they did, and now in Syria, the more often it happens, the more used to it the world gets to them being these at least regional powers who are willing to invade these countries. And so to some extent, perhaps it's a medium and long-term win for him in establishing a precedent, even if it doesn't necessarily do exactly what they planned to when he moved in specifically for Assad.
It's a huge strategic win for him. I mean, look, the conflict will go on there. Assad is still under threat. He saved Assad's regime, and he sent a message to every ally of Russia that Russia will back you, regardless of what the world says. And we don't care what the world says. We're your buddies.
Yeah.
That matters to people, especially in the Middle East and a lot of the rest of the world where America...
I think well played by Putin.
Well played by Putin.
It'll be also interesting to see. I mean, we've heard him make claims about where they were and weren't deploying
troops before, at least in Eastern Europe. It'll be interesting to find out. We find out in 3 months the satellite photographs show they didn't move any troops out. They increased the troops. It's entirely possible.
That's entirely possible. Yeah. That's entirely possible. But for him, I think Putin has achieved most of his goals, and constant, relentless military bombing and flight operations are expensive to maintain.
That's true.
In a country that's got a contracting economy.
That's true. We have to keep that in mind. Okay, so we're going to take a very micro break before we come back with Anna Kasparian leading us through some awesome stories for what tonight we'll have to pass for our second hour. So we will see you in just a few.
everybody. Welcome back to TYT. Before we get to some second hour stories, we have an announcement to make that's super exciting, so I want to go ahead and make it. I would like to name TYT's Turk of the Month for the month of February 2016. She is a relatively new member of the Young Turks, and her name is Megan McKenzie.
Oh, Megan!
Yes, there she is.
Hey!
Megan. All right, so every month we will choose a Turk of the Month at random from our pool of TYT members, and this is our way of giving back to our members. Not only do our members get extra members-only content and archives of our shows, we want to ensure that we also give you guys fun things like a tablet, which we just sent to Megan McKenzie. Now, again, she was chosen at random, and I actually had a call with her and got to know her a little bit, which was really exciting and really nice. And she's great. I mean, she's a long-time viewer of TYT, and then she decided to become a member after Cenk had reported on some poll numbers regarding Bernie Sanders that no other media outlet was reporting on. So she felt like she needed to do her part to support the show by becoming a member. Now, we understand money's tight for a lot of people, and becoming a member, will cost you $10 a month. But, anyone who supports the show in any way is someone that we love and, we look out for. Yeah. Megan, thank you for doing what you're doing. You're awesome. She's young. She's motivated. She's politically active. And I just love getting to know our members. So if you guys are interested in being members of TYT, all you need to do is go to tytnetwork.com/join. And there are many different levels of membership. And again, you guys make the show happen. Without you, we would not be able to do what we do and be as honest as we get to be with our audience.
See, Anna, you like to down on us covering polls, but it brought her to us.
That's true.
Oh,
that's true.
Nelly.
Yeah. So, all right. You called me out.
Okay, well, I've got some polls. Let's talk.
All right. Thank you, Megan. We love you, and we love all our members and our general audience. You guys are awesome. All right. So with that said, let's move on to some stories.
Yeah, I see it. Okay, I see it.
He's bragging with tweets.
Jimmy Millions.
Okay, Jimmy loves to show us favorable tweets for him. Oh, look at this person loves me, and if it's a hot girl, he'd be like, "Go follow me."
Yeah, he's done that a few times.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, let's get to the stories. We have limited time. Neil deGrasse Tyson is one of my favorite astrophysicists, and he tweets about various scientific topics. However, unfortunately, recently he tweeted something that many people took great offense to, and it had to do with sex. He tweeted the following: "If there were ever a species for whom sex hurt, it surely went extinct long ago." Now, I don't know why he tweeted that, and I don't know why he didn't consider all the different animals who have really painful sex, but he did get called out on this.
He obviously never met my parents.
Aww. I don't know what that means.
I don't know.
I heard a lot of gnashing and wailing teeth.
Oh, okay. I don't want to know. All right.
Sounded painful.
But instead of humans, let's focus a little on animals.
My parents had 12 kids before KY jelly. Just remember this. Okay.
Okay. So Kyle Hill excellently responded back to Neil deGrasse Tyson and said the following: "Yeah, I'm sure female cats love those fine cat penises. Oh, and bed bugs can't get enough of traumatic insemination."
Traumatic?
Dude, I did not know what that was.
Oh, yeah?
So I looked it up, right? And so
pretty hot.
I've been doing it for 6 months. I didn't even know.
The male bed bug pierces the female bed bug abdomen, right? And it's really, I guess it's painful. I don't know, and it sounds terrible. Here's another one, okay? "And snails love getting stabbed in the head with sex spikes, and spiders go crazy for snapping their penises off." And
what?
Yeah, and
try it once. Try it once.
You know, some people are into that kind of thing. You know what I'm saying? And then finally, "And female ducks evolved labyrinth corkscrew vaginas for no reason."
Labyrinthian.
Labyrinthian corkscrew vaginas for no reason.
What?
Okay.
I just wish that Neil deGrasse Tyson had been watching on Think Tank on what used to be TYTU. We had a long-running series of videos, Bizarre Animal Sex Facts.
Yes.
Really could have avoided this problem.
So you were smarter than Neil deGrasse.
One time, yes.
Isn't that amazing?
Okay, I love him, and he's right about a lot of different things. But here's something that I really want to bring up, because I noticed that even our own audience tends to make this mistake, and it drives me crazy. I've made this mistake, and it drives me crazy whenever I do it. So if there's a particular scientist who's an expert on one area of science, that doesn't make him an expert in every area of science, right? Like, he's an astrophysicist. He's one of the smartest people. I've paid too much money to see him give the same speech twice, okay? I love him. He's so smart. So he made a mistake. He's not like the king of the animal world where he, like, studies every single animal and the type of painful sex they have. So it's fine. Again, he's an astrophysicist. That doesn't mean that he knows everything about the animal world.
The reason, look, I think that people are being too hard. I think it's mostly people like to be able to point out when a really smart person is wrong. It's not the first time that he's been wrong in one of his tweets. He tweets a lot, by the way.
Yeah.
The only reason I think it's worthy of a little bit of criticism is because he's not just a scientist, and he's not just a famous scientist. He is a science educator and communicator that people trust implicitly. And I don't know, I don't think, like, a kid's life is going to be ruined because he thinks sex can never be painful or something. But we expect him to hold himself to a pretty high standard.
By the way, there are humans who have certain conditions that make sex painful. Like, I remember reading about Lena Dunham having some sort of condition, I forget what it's called, that leads to really painful sex. And it's a real problem that humans go through. Yeah, so, look, we all have lapses in judgment, and we all make mistakes. Just because he's someone that a lot of people trust doesn't mean that he's never going to make a mistake.
Yeah,
you know
No, I dated a girl. She had real painful. No, she did. She had a condition was really painful. Then one day I just said, "Why don't you use the other hole?" And anyway, it worked out.
Oh my god!
It really worked out.
I thought you were going to make a big penis joke.
No, she used the wrong hole. That's all. You just gotta use the right. Everything is got its own place, right? Just like my dad said, everything fits. Don't force it, you know?
Yeah.
That was when we were packing for a camping fish. I don't know. Whatever. That was different. But, Jesus.
Let's talk about rice.
And what is it? By the way, just because this guy likes the Astros more than anybody other team, why does he get to fucking talk about shit like we? You know what? I'm a Cub physicist. I love the Chicago Cubs. I don't go around telling people what they should think about. Anyway, I like the Astros too. That's all I'm saying. I didn't bother to become an astrophysicist. Anyway.
Has anyone else on this panel ever smoked weed and watched Cosmos with Neil deGrasse Tyson? I highly recommend it.
How about mushrooms? Anybody?
No, I haven't.
Mushrooms help.
Mushrooms freak me out. Like, I can't be in a confined space. I gotta be out. I gotta be out in nature, like skipping around.
What about DMT?
I haven't done DMT.
Okay, me neither. I look forward to it. One day. I look forward to me and.
All right, let's move on. A new video surfaced showing a man urinating on the production line at a Kellogg's Rice Krispies factory. Now, this story, of course, has gone viral, but it actually was filmed 2 years ago. So any and all products that were urinated on were either consumed or when expired and weren't consumed, but I'm assuming were probably consumed. Now, the video surfaced on Friday, but the incident allegedly happened 2 years ago at a Kellogg's plant in Memphis. Now, during this time, there was this huge labor dispute among the company and its employees, and we don't know what the reasoning it was behind this employee doing what he did, but there is some speculation that the labor dispute is what caused it. But regardless of that, of course, Kellogg's is going after this person and trying to prosecute him to the fullest extent. Now, let me give you examples of tweets that Kellogg put out. We're outraged and disgusted. Internal and criminal investigations are underway. We'll post more info as it's available. The products that were affected by this include Rice Krispies, Rice Krispie treats, granola clusters, and other puffed rice products.
Wow. Snap, crackle, piss. Am I right?
I just realized, why didn't we go with Rice Krispies? Damn.
We missed it.
Yeah, it's amazing how much damage mentally, like emotionally and psychologically can be done by one person doing something like this. Like, you see, I heard once that a guy at Taco Bell had taken a dump in the black beans.
No, I can't handle it.
So
they're just so unfortunate.
I really like eating at Taco Bell, and I know it wasn't at that one, and it wasn't recently, but you sort of look at it a little bit, and it's hard to tell anyway.
And you know, it's like they're not going to shit in all the beans, so they probably won't all taste good. But I don't know if you've had Taco Bell beans. That's okay. I like Taco Bell. Maybe it can only help.
Look, it's ridiculous to say with complete certainty that he did this because of the labor dispute, but what I want to emphasize in this story, because I think that there's something we can take away from it, is that generally speaking, employees do the right thing and they respect the company and they're good workers when they feel like they're being respected and when they're being compensated properly, right? Yeah. So, if you're expecting your employees to work insanely long hours because it's a special year that you feel like it's necessary for that to happen, give them an incentive. Make them feel like they're valued. You see what I'm saying?
I do. I do.
And they'll be more loyal to you, and they'll do their job correctly. I think that's important.
I mean, in that case, the Rice Krispies thing, let's say they had to make Rice Krispies late at a bunch of debates in town halls.
Yeah.
Weeks and weeks and weeks. Do something for them, or they might miss in your Krispies.
Oh. Like a little financial incentive,
Exactly. For the puff rice manufacturers.
You mean if people had to come in extra shifts to make the puffs because there was extra demand?
Exactly.
That they should probably share some of those profits with the people making the puffs.
Yeah. Or let's say it's an insane year. Like the profit margins are massive, right? Like all of a sudden Americans have like this newfound love for Rice Krispies.
Massive?
Should they?
What do you mean that? Because some of the employees don't get paid at all. Just remember that.
Oh,
I know.
Of course they don't.
So we're just saying that Kellogg needs to take care of the situation.
This Kellogg guy, in his defense, being on strike, it is draining.
That was a good one. All right, guys. Let's do one final story, and then we are going to have a post game for members today. So if you're a member, that. All right. Utah has declared a state of emergency, let me start that again. Utah has declared a public health crisis involving pornography. They believe that pornography is so serious and so terrible for their citizens' health that they've decided to call it a public health crisis. Now, let me give you the details on that. Apparently, one person says that this ought to be seen like a public health crisis, like a war, like an infectious, fatal epidemic, like a moral plague on the body politic that is maiming the lives of our citizens. And that's from Elder Jeffrey R. Holland, who's from the LDS Church. So the incredible thing is, all right, you're going to have religious people within any state saying that, oh my God, we got to do something about porn. It's so serious. We got to do something about it right away.
Yeah.
But usually politicians understand that there are better things to do than to focus on the porn industry, right? Also, if you want to ban porn, that's virtually impossible to do. But
it's impossible.
It's impossible.
People will give up drugs before they give up porn.
That's exactly right. And lawmakers in Utah still decided to pass this legislation calling it a public health crisis.
Yeah.
Now, the governor needs to sign it, but I don't know what they plan on doing after it's signed. Like, they can't ban porn.
Porn vaccination.
This is actually a subject I'm a bit of an expert on.
Oh, okay.
Not from looking at. My wife sells porn.
I didn't know that.
She works for Playboy TV.
I saw her selling out of her trunk.
No, that's on the weekends. Sometimes we'll fill up the trunk of the car and pass out. But Utah is off the charts. No, I mean if you look at a map of the United States, porn consumers, it's off the charts.
I think
also, it's off the charts for gangster rap.
That's fascinating.
Like the Fugees couldn't get an audience of more than 6 people in Utah. Any gangster rap artist, millions.
That's incredible. So what do you think they're going to do with this legislation? Like, let's say the governor signs it into law. Okay, so it's a public health crisis. Are we going to use federal funds for you to deal with your public health crisis of men jerking off to pornography?
It's not just men. There's some schlicking going on as
Absolutely.
well.
Absolutely. You know what? There's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with it. Best case scenario, they advise people that, as with anything else in life, doing too much could theoretically be bad for you. But what I like, and maybe this is me, a weird tangent, I'm sure that guy, the Elder Holland, is just trying to do what he thinks is best. But he's like, okay, I can't just sell this as a religious person. I got to make the metaphor that it's like a disease. It's like a plague. And then he says it's like a moral plague. So he got bored with trying to make it grounded in the real world, and he went back to this sort of pseudoscientific bullshit. Like, it's the fabric of society. It's always that vague, ethereal stuff that they try to say. When they can't show this person in this way, they have to say that something that doesn't exist has been damaged in some way that can't be measured.
Yeah.
Because actually, an orgasm every day is actually good for somebody, and it will prevent erectile dysfunction later in life.
What about 16 or 17 of them? That might be too much.
16 or 17 might be too much. If you're under 20, maybe that's possible. I think when your dick turns into a whistle,
it's stop.
All right. You know what? We're going to leave it at that.
Okay. Dick whistles as far as we go?
Yeah, that's as far as we go. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching today. For our members, there'll be a short post game for you right now. So stay tuned. For everyone else, have an awesome night. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.